Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the Assembly Committee on Judiciary to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Here.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Assemblywoman Hanson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hardy.
Here.
Assemblywoman Cassama. Assemblywoman Krasner. Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Wen.
Here.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblyman Orentlicker.
Here.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblywoman Cassama. Assemblywoman Krasner. Chairman Yeager.
Here. Please mark Assemblywoman Kasama absent excused. She may be joining us today. She may not, but in any case, she is excused if she's not able to join us. I expect Assemblywoman Krasner to join us momentarily. For now, please mark her absent, and I'll try to remember to note when she arrives. We do have a quorum. Good morning to every committee member, to those joining us on the Zoom, and to those who might be watching on the internet or on the legislature's YouTube page. Welcome to day 45 of the 81st session of the Nevada Legislature, and happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. Before we move on to our agenda, just a few housekeeping matters. If everyone on the Zoom could be sure to mute when you're not speaking, that will help with our audio feedback. And for our presenters and speakers on the Zoom today, if you could remember to state your name each time before you speak, particularly if you are answering a question, that will help our committee secretary prepare the minutes. I'll try to remind you if you forget to do that because it's not a natural thing to do, but I want to make life as easy as possible for our committee secretary. We do expect courtesy and respect in our interactions with one another. This most certainly is a day where there are going to be very strong and passionate disagreements on the bill in front of us. That is perfectly okay. We welcome the passion. What we don't welcome is personal attacks, inappropriate comments, profane language, and the like. So asking all committee members and those who may be participating either on the Zoom or by phone to keep your comments respectful, keep them to the substance of the bill. And I think if we can do that, we're going to have a very successful meeting. If you're not able to stay within those parameters, then you will forfeit the opportunity to provide the remainder of your testimony. Lastly, many committee members are accessing this meeting using multiple devices, laptops, desktops, iPads, iPhones. This is the virtual world we live in at the moment, so please don't see it as a sign of disrespect or inattention if members appear to be looking away. Most likely they're reading exhibits or trying to get a handle on what is going on in the hearing. So with all of that behind us, members, as you can see, we have one bill on the agenda today, and as I indicated, there's a lot of interest in this piece of legislation. At this time, I'm going to open the hearing on Assembly Bill 286. Assembly Bill 286 prohibits certain acts relating to firearms. And before I hand it over to our sponsor and presenters today, I just wanted to give everyone a little bit of the lay of the land in terms of how this meeting is going to operate. We're going to give the sponsor and the presenters a chance to present the bill. There are two main concepts in the bill, so each of those concepts are going to be presented separately. After that, we'll have an opportunity for questions. Members, I think there'll be a lot of questions, but I think we can help this meeting move along if you can really think about the question that you have and be succinct in asking it. That'll give everyone an opportunity to hopefully get questions answered. And then we'll take testimony and support, opposition, and neutral. I can tell you right now, we have way more people who'd like to offer testimony than we're going to have time for today. We do have a hard stop in this committee at 11:30 this morning, but we're going to get through as much of that testimony as possible. And for those who'd like to give testimony or not able to today, certainly would recommend you submit it in writing, express your opinion on the legislature's website, send emails, but we're going to just power through and do the best we can to get through this bill. So with those items in the rearview mirror, I'm going to hand it over to Assemblywoman Howdigi, who is the sponsor of the bill. And for this first part of the presentation, I believe she has Mr. McManus and Ms. Stevenson from MGM International who are going to help her present. And then once we get done with that, we'll talk about the second part of the presentation. So welcome back to the Assembly Judiciary Committee, Assemblywoman Howdigi. I believe you were on this committee back in 2017, and we sure miss you in the committee, but we're happy that you're back. And when you're ready to proceed, please go ahead.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it's Assemblyman Wheeler. I've got a point of order, if you don't mind, sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just received a 20-page amendment to this bill just early this morning. Honestly, I know I or no members of my caucus saw it until we walked in. And I'm wondering if we couldn't put this off for a while, this hearing off for 24 hours, so that we can actually digest everything that has been through. It's kind of, so thank you.
But we'll note, Assemblyman Wheeler, that the amendment was sent out to all members yesterday about 7:15 p.m. So that should have been in everyone's inbox for at least 12 hours. That was sent by the sponsor. And unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of pushing off any hearings this committee meeting. So I'll ask you just to do the best you can. And I believe Assemblywoman Howdigi did send a summary of that amendment, and I believe she'll go over that. So I appreciate the request, but it is respectfully denied at this time. Go ahead, Assemblywoman
Mr.
Howdigi.
Chairman.
Thank you, Chair Yeager. And once we get through the presentation, I will go through the 4 minor changes that the amendment submitted makes. But good morning, Chair Yeager and members of the Judiciary. For the record, I am Sandra Howdigi, representing Assembly District 41, and I'm here today to present Assembly Bill 286 for your consideration. In October 2017, my friend, my husband, and I, and countless others were at the Route 91 Music Festival when a gunman opened fire and killed 58 people, wounded nearly 500 others, devastating our city and changing our lives forever. People were here visiting Las Vegas to have an exciting, fun, memorable trip, only to experience the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. While we have made progress in the years since then, we've also seen continued violent incidents that have left both Nevadans and Las Vegas visitors questioning the safety of our community. In 2020, during a 3-month period from mid-July to October, we witnessed 7 shootings, including a shooting in front of Aria, a handgun just discharging inside the MGM casino floor, and a shooting outside the Miracle Mile shops at Planet Hollywood. And Metro Police confiscated 64 guns on the Strip. Just last week, we saw a shooting and a murder at the Wynn Garage. Metro Police Captain Dory Corinne said in a January interview to the Associated Press, quote, "Violent crime on the Strip rose significantly in September, and the primary driver for this activity was related to a sharp rise in firearm-related incidents and aggravated assaults," end quote. I know Metro and the sheriff are doing the best they can to handle this uptick, but they simply need more tools. In a post-COVID world, we know we need to show visitors and residents alike that we are a place where you can forget about your problems, not come to find more. We know we need every selling point we can get to get our tourism economy back on track. This is why I'm bringing forth AB 286. Chair, I would like to break this bill into 2 sections. Part 1 is the business empowerment section of the bill, which covers sections 2, 8, and 9. And part 2 of our bill is sections 3, 4, 5, and 7, which deal with the rising epidemic of unmarked, untraceable guns known as ghost guns. Part 1 of the Keep Nevada Safe bill strengthens existing law by empowering business owners to make the decision whether or not to allow armed individuals on their property. If an individual unlawfully trespasses while in possession of a firearm, this bill puts teeth into existing law and provides criminal penalties that a person can face, ranging from a misdemeanor to a Category E felony if they violate a business property owner's rights. Chair, with your permission, I would like to turn it over to John McManus with MGM Resorts, for remarks on the business empowerment section of our bill, and then continue on to part 2.
Welcome, Mr. McManus, and please go ahead. And Mr. McManus, you'll have to unmute.
Sorry. I had unmuted and it auto-muted on me. I apologize. So I'm John McManus. Thank you, Assemblywoman Howdigi, Chair Yeager, and members of the committee. And happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. I must have made it Thanksgiving. I apologize. As we emerge from the COVID pandemic and continue to reopen Las Vegas, it is absolutely essential that we address an issue that has emerged as increasingly concerning for the future of Nevada's economy: violence on the Las Vegas Strip. No sector in Nevada has been as negatively impacted by the pandemic as tourism and the hospitality industry, the economic backbone of the state's economy. Our industry's ability to recover will greatly depend on its ability to maintain and ensure the public health and safety of our guests, patrons, and employees. To be clear, this bill is not intended to limit any individual's right to bear arms in Nevada. Private businesses already have the ability to prohibit the presence of firearms on their premises. This language simply enhances the business community's toolkit to notify patrons of this prohibition and to call upon law enforcement to assist in addressing the situation before it escalates. The intent behind sections 1, 2, 8, and 9 of Assembly Bill 286 is to promote public safety, as well as cooperation between the Nevada business community and law enforcement agencies. I want to stress that businesses may opt in to firearm prohibition with exemptions, including but not limited to law enforcement and security personnel, certain hotel guests, and attendees of trade shows that feature firearms, which are a vital part of our economy. In closing, the language is not intended to prevent any specific incident on the Strip, but rather to prevent the emergence of a culture that invites violence on the Strip. It is essential that we signal to our customers all over the world that Las Vegas is the safest place to be. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time during the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. McManus. Assemblywoman Howdigi, are we going to Ms. Stevenson next?
No, we are going to go to part 2 next, Chair Yeager. And thank you, Mr. McManus. I think that's an important point to note that I left out, that this is an opt-in policy for businesses. Chair Yeager and members of the committee, part 2 of our bill, sections 3, 4, 5, and 7, deal with the rising epidemic of unmarked, untraceable guns, also known as ghost guns. Ghost guns are growing in popularity because they circumvent background checks and they are untraceable. These types of guns are manufactured in homes and also sold online as kits that are often easily assembled, and if they are used in a crime, law enforcement has no way to trace them because they do not have serial numbers. In 2020, federal ATF agents raided a Nevada-based company, Polymer 80, one of the nation's largest manufacturers of ghost guns. Polymer 80 was illegally manufacturing and distributing firearms, failing to pay taxes, shipping guns across state lines, and not conducting background checks. Last September, 2 LA County Sheriff deputies were shot while sitting in their patrol vehicle by a man using a gun he built with parts from Nevada company Polymer 80. Chair, I would now like to turn it over to David Pacino with Giffords Law, followed by Stephen Lindley from Brady, and last, Emily Walton with Everytown for further remarks.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Howdigi, and that's the order we'll go in for continuing remarks in presentation of Assembly Bill 286. So, Mr. Pacino, hopefully I got your name right. If you wouldn't mind providing your testimony, please.
Thank you very much, Chair Yeager. And thank you, Assemblywoman Howdigi, and to the members of the committee for the opportunity to present to you today. My name is David Pacino. I'm a senior staff attorney with Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence, which is the legal arm of the organization founded by former Congresswoman and gun violence survivor Gabby Giffords. As the Assemblywoman said, I'm going to be speaking to part 2 of Assembly Bill 286 concerning ghost guns. Ghost guns evade our gun laws by ingeniously exploiting a loophole in the way that the federal government regulates firearms. Firearms are made up of a number of different components, but only one of these components is subject to regulation. That part is generally called the frame in the case of handguns and the receiver in the case of long guns. When someone buys a traditionally manufactured frame or receiver, they are subject to a background check. It will come with the serial number and other markings that uniquely identify it, and records of the sale will be made and kept. This process confirms that the buyer is legally allowed to possess firearms. It also enables a process called tracing, which is a critical tool for law enforcement and gun investigations because it allows them to connect a recovered firearm to its retail buyer and back up the supply chain. Ghost guns evade all of these regulations. Companies sell a frame or receiver that has not quite been fully manufactured, and as a result, the federal government does not classify it as a firearm. There is no background check, there is no serial number, and there are no records. They are untraceable. And they are often sold with all the guides, tools, and parts needed to produce a fully functioning firearm with no particular training or experience. As a result, they are a ready way for people who are not allowed to buy a gun to legally obtain one nevertheless. And they have been used by such individuals who are prohibited because of felony convictions or because they were underage in acts of mass violence, including at Santa Monica College and Saugus High School in California. Ghost guns have become so pervasive in California that, according to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, 1 in 3 guns they recover there is a ghost gun. And while the problem of ghost guns first emerged in earnest in California, it is rapidly spreading across the country. City after city is reporting massive increases in the number of ghost guns they are recovering, and this disturbing trend has redoubled in the pandemic year, as ghost gun sellers have reported that they are selling so many that they are having trouble keeping them in stock. To give just one example from this week, Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro announced that the number of crime gun recoveries of ghost guns in Philadelphia has increased massively in the last couple of years. In 2019, there were 99 recoveries in Philadelphia. In 2020, there were 250. In 2021, they are on pace for 600 recoveries of ghost guns connected to a crime. This pattern is being felt across the country. But precisely because these products evade federal regulation, we don't truly know how many ghost guns are out there. What we do know is that part of the reason for this explosion in ghost guns is that they're highly attractive to gun traffickers. There is no need to recruit a straw purchaser with a clean record to walk into a gun dealer and make a purchase. There's no need to travel to different dealers to disguise buying patterns. And there's no need to worry about paperwork that will link the guns back to the purchase. They are easy to obtain and untraceable. And it's no wonder that when law enforcement uncovers trafficking rings, they are often finding ghost guns, including in Nevada, where one trafficking ring was using ghost gun products to manufacture untraceable machine guns. For all these reasons, it's my belief that ghost guns pose the fastest rising threat to gun safety in this country. Assembly Bill 286 will address this growing crisis by cutting off the supply of ghost guns at its source. Section 3 of the bill would prohibit the unfinished frames and receivers that are designed to avoid federal regulation. Sections 4 and 5 will address the manufacture, possession, and sale of the completed weapons. Together, this bill will give law enforcement the tools it needs to stop the flow of these parts to traffickers that are flooding the streets with untraceable firearms. I also want to note what this bill will not do. It will not affect the manufacturing activities of firearm manufacturers that produce and sell traditional traceable firearms, as there is an exception for licensed manufacturers. It will not prohibit the activities or hobbyists or scratch build enthusiasts who build historically accurate firearms, as there is an exception for antique firearms, which includes replicas of weapons made before the 20th century. It will also not prevent gun enthusiasts from assembling and customizing legally owned, traditionally manufactured firearms. Anyone who is legally allowed to possess firearms will still be able to purchase a serialized frame or receiver and build a firearm around that traceable component. And last, I want to note that this bill will not immediately criminalize anyone who currently possesses these untraceable firearms. There will be a grace period that allows individuals to sell out of state, to surrender, or to render inoperable their untraceable firearms by January 1st. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to present to you today, and I believe Steve Lindley will be presenting next.
Thank you so much. Please go ahead, Mr. Lindley.
Good morning. My name is Steve Lindley. I'm a program manager with the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence out here in Los Angeles. And I'm going to go through a short tutorial about exactly what a ghost gun is, how they're being sold, and some of the impact that it does have for the law enforcement community. I'm a 28-year veteran of law enforcement here in California. And between 2009 and 2018, I ran the California Department of Justice Bureau of Firearms. I'm going to share my screen right now for a short presentation. as soon as I can get it to work. So really what is a ghost gun? And this is dealing mainly with federal law. So essentially a 80% receiver is the frame of a firearm that is manufactured just below the level of completion that will require it to be considered a firearm under ATF regulations. ATF does have some discretion in how they look at what is and what is not a firearm, and those laws impact the rest of the United States, not just particular states. So by not having not being a firearm, it's not required to be serialized, and with that, it's not subject to any form of background check under the federal guidelines. And with that, if there's no background check and no serial number, it can't be traced in a crime, hence the term ghost gun. It really doesn't exist in government entities, and law enforcement has no ability to find out where that gun came from when used in a crime. So why is it a problem? It circumvents almost all state and federal firearm laws. And if we don't have a background check, that equals big problems for not only the federal government, but for the states, because we can't keep these firearms out of the hands of prohibited people, criminal gang members, narco traffickers, or people who are just prohibited from purchasing firearms because of domestic violence or mental health issues. And we've seen these firearms being used by these individuals throughout the United States, including Nevada. So you really have two types of ghost guns that are out there. Again, this problem, like Mr. Pacino said, started in California as a way to get around California's assault weapon laws. And what you have here on the are pictures taken from a gun show in California in late 2019, when we still had gun shows before the COVID epidemic. So what you have here on the left-hand side is you have a traditional lower receiver for a AR-15, but it is in a ghost gun configuration, because as you see here, you have the magazine well in the middle of the picture, but you don't have the trigger mechanism that is basically cut out of the firearm. They're selling this for $120. And oftentimes when they sell these, it's cash and carry, no background checks, no license checks, no age verification. So these are available to be purchased by people who are under 21, depending on the state, and even under 18, and can also easily be purchased online. The right-hand picture is just the different configurations that you can buy at even a California gun show. And it's showing that, anything from a pistol format AR-15 to a regular AR-15 configuration. So the problem that we have is when it was just for the AR-15 or rifles, according to ATF's 2018 firearm tracing report for Nevada that was released in 2019, that Nevada recovered and traced a little over 1,000 long guns, of which assault weapons are a very, very small percentage of that. However, there was over 4,500 firearms or handguns that were recovered in Nevada crime scenes. And, that's where we're starting to see the change with the ghost guns going from the assault weapon platform to the handgun platform. Now, assault weapons are used in most mass shootings. However, they aren't as prevalent on day-to-day crimes as handguns are. And that's not only a trend in Nevada, but that's pretty much a trend throughout the nation. So same gun shows. You start to see here on the left-hand side, these are polymer 80 pistols, and they're in the ghost gun configuration. They are being displayed in one gun show, and they're not really put together. You can just only see the slides. However, in the box underneath them contains the rest of the components to put the gun together. In a subsequent gun show that didn't have any regulations or any enforcement from ATF or from the California Department of Justice, you start seeing the vendor put them together, and they're being put together with zip ties and rubber bands in order to show how they would actually look when you put them together. And then finally, on the right-hand side here, you have the completed kit, which I have, well, let me unblur myself. But you have the completed kit. And as Mr. Pacino said, everything are in these kits that are made by Polymer 80 to put it together. All the components for the firearm, along with the jig in order to do the drilling the holes, and the materials in order to shave off or sand off certain components that will bring it into a configuration so you can make it into a firearm. So, going to report on some of the California statistics. ATF is reporting in California alone that about 30% of the firearms that they recover are considered ghost guns. So if you looked at the problem, let's say in 2000, there was zero. If you look at maybe a 2010, there was a few that were being recovered. Now it's 30% of all the firearms ATF is recovering. You look at the Los Angeles Police Department, who recovers a large amount of firearms. They're reporting that approximately 40% of the firearms that they're recovering are considered ghost guns. And that prompted the city attorney of Los Angeles, Mike Fuhrer, in order to sue Polymer 80 over their business practices and really providing firearms to the general public that are being used more and more during criminal activity. So some of the things that different states have done in order to address this problem: California, back in 2016, the Assembly passed Bill 1673, but that was vetoed by Governor Brown at the time. And that really would have stopped the problem here in California before it would have gotten out of control. We missed that opportunity. So in 2019, Assembly Bill 879 was passed and signed by Governor Newsom, but it originally wasn't going to take effect until July 2025. We were able to provide a large amount of money to the Department of Justice to move up that implementation date, and that will provide the ammunition background check process that California has towards the precursor parts of the ghost guns. However, that's not nearly as good of a background check that California does in most firearms, or even that the federal government does through the NICS process. So Pennsylvania, their Attorney General back in December 2019 saw this as a growing problem and classified ghost guns as firearms that would require a background check. But even that hasn't stopped some of the problems that are happening in Pennsylvania, because they're so easy to traffic because they don't have serial numbers on them. Washington, D.C., who has some significant crime problems, especially with firearms, back in March 2020, decided to, again, they started to take action because they're seeing that growing problem with ghost guns, and they wanted to get a hold of it before it became a tsunami in their communities. Rhode Island, again, last year in June, signed a bill banning so-called ghost guns in Rhode Island, just a complete ban of those, and making it illegal to manufacture, import, sell, or ship, deliver, or possess these in the state of Rhode Island. Again, Washington, D.C., trying to take a more aggressive action. They're suing the manufacturer of Polymer 80, and that's been somewhat of a trend from other states and other cities targeting specifically Polymer 80, which are made and manufactured in Nevada. New York also takes some action, and we can see states and cities trying to avoid this problem or address it before it becomes too big of a problem. So I want to stop sharing my screen here, and I'll change my filter so you can see the ghost gun a little bit better. But traditionally, again, this is the Polymer 80. It comes in a nice black box. You can get this at brick and mortar stores. You can these are very prominent at gun shows, not only in California, Arizona, but Nevada as well. And it comes with all the pieces that you need. So as you'll see here, you have what's called their jig, and it's hard to see on video here, but it gives you tutorials about what pieces need to be removed, and it gives you the ability through a sandstone to basically sand this down. It takes a little bit longer to sand it than to cut it, and then it has another area here in order for you to sand down to remove pieces. And then you have 6 holes to drill, and then a piece to snap off in the middle. That's all it takes for you to make this what's called an 80% lower receiver into a lower receiver that then would need to be under federal law, would need to be serialized. All the pieces, the tools and the pieces for the different firearm come in the kit, including the barrel and the slide. So this kit was purchased at the Ventura Gun Show in February of 2020 here in California, and it was purchased for $400 cash. Before I purchased the kit, it was kind of a banner sales at this particular vendor. And, there were individuals that were under 21 that were purchasing them, which in California, you can't purchase a handgun if you're under 21. And there was at least one individual that was clearly under 18 years old that purchased it. Cash and carry. They don't want receipts. So this really starts to look towards the opportunity to have firearm trafficking, because there's no regulations behind it in most states, and there's no background checks. There's no ID checks. It's cash and carry and move on. So as Mr. Pacino said, this is becoming more of a problem when you look at least in California, law enforcement. So again, I want to share my screen here so we can look at a few cases just recently here in California that have dealt with our ghost gun issue when it comes to law enforcement. So back in 2019, a CHP officer was shot and killed. There was actually 3 officers that were shot. One of them unfortunately died, and it was a ex-felon that possessed a AR-15 style ghost gun, and he was able to get that because there's no background checks. And then unfortunately shot several law enforcement officers, and one died. We have another officer up in Sacramento, and she was also killed with an illegal ghost gun that was purchased by a individual who was prohibited in California from having that firearm. He made it into a full weapon, and unfortunately killed one of the officers. And then finally, most recently, you have the 2 deputies in Los Angeles that were ambushed outside of a rail station, and that individual again had a ghost gun. So that prompted at least the city of Los Angeles to take action and move forward with a lawsuit against Polymer 80, which again, unfortunately, is manufactured in Nevada. That's the end of my presentation, but I will stay on for any questions that you may have about ghost guns specifically. But this is becoming a bigger problem, and because they're not serialized, there's nothing that law enforcement can do to trace these back to the individuals who originally purchased them or the manufacturers, and that is a huge problem when it comes to investigations of serious crimes, specifically shootings and homicides. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lindley. Can I ask you a favor? When you have a chance, could you email that presentation to our committee manager? I don't see that we have that uploaded on our website, but I think it would be useful to have that as an exhibit. So at some point today, if you could send that over or send it to Assemblywoman Howdigi, and she'll make sure it gets to the right place. I did want to note for the record that Assemblywoman Krasner is here. She joined us right before we started the presentation. So Madam Secretary, if you could make sure that she is marked as present, I would appreciate it. And committee, we're just going to have a little bit more testimony before we open it up for questions. I'm going to go next to Ms. Walton to provide some additional testimony.
Good morning, Emily Walton, Chair Yeager, members of the committee. I'm with Everytown for Gun Safety and Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I'll keep this short. Our partners in this movement with us have done a great job demonstrating this problem with ghost guns. When it comes to gun violence, the rise of ghost guns is the fastest growing gun safety problem that we've seen in years. During the pandemic, due to panic buying, ghost gun building blocks have been flying off the shelves. Making a ghost gun only takes a few hours, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, has allowed the core building blocks for these guns to be sold online with no background check or serial number. This means that ghost gun building blocks can be delivered right to the front door of a convicted domestic abuser, a gun trafficker, a child, or a white supremacist without a background check, and they're untraceable if later used to commit a crime. Over the last decade, nearly 2,500 ghost guns were connected to criminal activity in 102 federal cases. We urge you to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Walton. Assemblywoman Howdigi, I'll hand it back over to you for some remarks on the bill itself, and then we'll open it up for questions. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Yeager, and I'll keep my remarks safe. I just want to take this opportunity to walk the members of the committee through the slight changes in the amendment I submitted yesterday evening to the committee and committee members. There is no substantive changes to the bill. There's minor clarifications. We are changing section 2.7D3 to include in the definition of a gaming establishment, quote, including all tenants and business establishments located therein. We are also adding the word authorized in front of agent so that it reads authorized agent. We are changing section 2.2 so that the opt-in is accomplished by posting a sign on the premise. We are also adding to section 2.1 security officers employed by the covered premise as some of those exempt. And we are changing the references from handgun to firearms in the bill. We are also adding section 2.5B4 to expand the exemption language for employees or operators of a trade show to hold or transport an operable firearm. And those are the changes in the amendment I submitted yesterday evening, Chair Yeager. We are now ready for questions, Chair.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Howdigy and other presenters. I know we're going to have a number of questions, but before we start, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question to make sure I understand what this bill is trying to do. I've, like many committee members, I've received quite a number of emails about the bill, and I just wanted to confirm that, this bill is talking about a covered premises, but nothing in this bill requires a covered premises to adopt a policy outlawing firearms, and nothing requires them to, even if they do adopt a policy, nothing requires them to enforce the policy. And the reason I ask that is to point to committee members. Section 2 of the bill, I think it's subsection 6, which is on page 7 of the amendment. My reading of that is that this is essentially an opt-in sort of scenario for the covered premises. And I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly, because I've been getting a lot of communications that seem to indicate that there's going to be an outright ban on everything that this bill defines as a covered premises. So if Assemblywoman Howdigy, if you could address that, or if one of your presenters could, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair Yeager, for the question, Assemblywoman Sandra Howdigy, and you are correct. Section 2, sub 6B reads, nothing in this section shall require an owner-operator. So this is not a mandate on small businesses. This is simply an opt-in policy that a business can themselves choose to opt into.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And folks, if you just give me a minute here, I'm taking a couple notes, and I wanted to ask committee members if you could show me by a show of hands who has questions on the bill. I'm sure there'll be a lot of them. And we'll have a chance, let's see a number of folks. So just before I go to questions, I want to let members know the presentation of that bill took about a half an hour. So I have reserved likewise about a half an hour for us to try to get through our questions. I don't know if that's going to be adequate, but we're going to do the best we can because I want to make sure we get to testimony on the bill. So with that, I'll stop talking and just ask members to try to keep your questions as concise as possible. And Assemblywoman Howdigy, when a question is asked, I'll just simply go to you if you want to answer the question or if you want to invite one of your other presenters to answer it. So we'll start questions. So far, the list I have is Assemblywoman Cohen, Assemblyman Wheeler, and Assemblywoman Hanson, and I'm sure we'll have more. So Assemblywoman Cohen, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. My question is about in section 2, sub 2B, the covered premises. There's no pre-notice, right? So if we've got someone who's coming from out of town and they're used to carrying their firearm and they arrive at the premises and they see that the covered premises has decided to prohibit firearms because they see the sign. We now have them traveling a great distance and now don't really have a place to go. Is there a way, would you consider maybe requiring that it at least be posted on the website when reservations are made or something like that? So we have people who are so we're accommodating people and so that they have knowledge before they travel across country or across state lines.
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Cohen. This is Assemblywoman Sandra Howdigy for the record, and I'd like to start, Chair Yeager, and then if anyone else wants to jump in and add anything to it. But Assemblywoman, this is the minimum that the covered premise has to do. At a minimum, they have to provide notice by posting a sign in their facility if they are deciding to opt in. If covered premises decide to do anything on top of that, like providing notice, signatures upon check-in on something, or providing notices before someone's making a reservation or upon reservation, they can do that. But what this is outlining is the minimum a casino or a covered premise has to do if they choose to opt into this legislation.
And I'm not seeing anybody else jump in with a response to that. So Assemblywoman Cohen, did that answer your question, or did you have any follow-up?
It did. I guess I do still have some concerns if someone's coming again to a premises and they had no notice before they arrived. So, and then I guess my only other question is just on page 4, page 4, I'll just give you the line number because it's 2B3, Roman numeral 4. So line 32, there's reference to the written notification that the guest would provide written notification. And I would just ask or clarify if that can be via email as opposed to just written paper.
Those are great suggestions. And even with your prior suggestion, Assemblywoman Cohen, this is Assemblywoman Sandra Howdicke for the record. I'd be happy to work with you after the hearing on suggestions that you think might improve the intent of the bill.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll go next to Assemblyman Wheeler, who I believe has a couple of questions. Please go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Like I said, I'll hold them down. The first question actually would be for Mr. Finley. I think the Assemblywoman could obviously answer this if she wanted to. But the kit guns that you're talking about that you're calling ghost guns, a lot of hobbyists use these, and under federal law, those are quite legal. So outlawing them in Nevada, as this bill tries to do, basically puts a company in my district out of business, and the people can still go outside and buy these federally. So shouldn't this law, if it's such a good law, go to the Congress and not come down to the state levels of one at a time? That's my first question. The second question is liability protection on the other side of this bill, where we're saying people can outlaw guns. I see a lot of problems there, like Leosa, et cetera. But will there be anyone who opts into this, would there be a requisite for them to provide security or liability protection when people can no longer protect themselves in an environment that we've seen so many times before, where concealed weapons holders, Leos, et cetera, have been able to protect themselves when a bad guy with a gun comes in?
Thank you, Assemblyman Wheeler. Before we take the response to that, I just wanted to clarify. I think you were directing your question to Mr. Lindley. And the reason I mentioned that is we do have a Mr. Finley on the Zoom as well, but he is going to be testifying in opposition to the bill. So just wanted to clarify your question was from Mr. Lindley.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. It was kind of like saying Nevada and Nevada, Mr. Lindley.
Please go ahead, Mr. Lindley.
Steve Lindley, I apologize for my accent a little bit. So it would be better if this was addressed on the federal level. ATF has the ability to deal with this through a regulatory process, but right now that is not taking place. So states, counties, cities are addressing this individually. And again, it makes for some differences between what might happen in California compared to what might happen in New York or Washington, D.C. or Pennsylvania. But all these states and cities are trying to address the problem that we see with the ghost guns and the easy access that criminals have to these firearms.
Well, thank you very much for that. So we're going to drive a company in my district, and we'll just be able to buy them from Kentucky. Maybe my people can move there and make solar panels. Thank you.
And Mr. Wheeler, I believe you had a second part to your question. Could you restate it for me? Because I think that was directed towards me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. What liability protections and security requirements are going to be required when people opt into this, because people, licensed carriers can no longer carry in these areas?
So we hadn't thought about any liability, but I would assure you, Mr. Wheeler, I'd be happy to have discussions with you after the hearing. And being a CCW or carrying an armed weapon doesn't necessarily mean you're fully protected. I would remind you that the Wynn shooting, the man who unfortunately died was also armed.
So none is what you're saying. Thank you.
May I supplement that answer?
Please go ahead. If you could just state
Yeah.
your name for
Yeah.
the record.
John McManus. Business owners and property owners already have duties under common law to provide safe environments for their business invitees. So I don't see that changing here. And it is sort of a matter of what's reasonably foreseeable under the circumstances. And I suspect, at least in a casino environment, any casino that chooses to opt in will already have extensive security plans and provisions for that sort of thing. And I think it's probably adequately addressed under existing common law.
Thank you, Mr. McManus, and I would agree with you on a large like yours. I'm talking about, a 7-Eleven or even a gathering of, a political gathering somewhere where they can't afford this type of thing. But thank you for your answer.
And Chair Yeager, I would like to respond as well. This is Assemblywoman Sandra Howdicke for the record. Again, this is an opt-in policy, so businesses can choose to opt in. And some of these provisions already exist. They're existing law. There are already few covered premises or properties don't allow firearms on their premise. So this is already existing law.
Yeah, I think we'll move on to some additional questions. I know there are several out there, and I've seen you raise your hand, so please be patient, members. We'll try to get through them all. We're going to go next for a question to Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity, and good morning, everyone. My questions, a couple of them are in, I think you probably have touched on some of this already, but in Section 2, Sub 2, and Sub 5. So in relationship to concealed weapons permit holders coming to a property where, say, they've opted in, so we're saying that with permission, they're not even allowed, they have to have permission, or even with permission, they're not going to be allowed to have their weapon if they stay in the hotel? And then I have a follow-up to that.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Hanson, for the question. This is Assemblywoman Sandra Howdicke for the record. Yes, Assemblywoman Hanson, if a property opts in to this piece of legislation, then they would have to give notice, and that would apply to everyone carrying a firearm, unless they have written notice from the property that they are allowed to be in possession of a firearm while on their property. And again, I would like to remind, especially if we look at the Las Vegas Strip area, members of the committee, this is already common practice. All of the MGM properties already prohibit people from being on their properties with a firearm. We saw over 2020 that Wynn started implementing the same policy and implemented metal detectors upon entry on their property. So this is already applies in current day to both people who are open carrying and people who have CCWs.
And then, Chair, if I may, to follow up. So existing law. So how do we handle a CCW permit holder comes to a property, they can't take their weapon inside, but they keep their weapon in the vehicle that's parked on the premises? Are they now in violation and maybe going to be guilty of some of the misdemeanors because they just have mere possession somewhere on the premises? Because if they are in the habit of keeping their gun in their car because of where they might be traveling, but then they come to a property now that is an opt-in, not allowed, what happens to that person, the CCW permit holder that has it in their car because they can't bring it in the building? Car off the property? Just wondering how we handle this now.
They have to have written permission from the property to have a firearm on the property if it's a property that has opted into this legislation, whether it is on the person or. And as to how it's handled now, I'm not sure how it's handled now. Mr. McManus, I'm not sure if you can speak to how it's handled now if a person.
Sure. For the record, John McManus, this is a situation we already currently deal with. The law-abiding citizen, typically somebody who has a concealed carry permit, who reads the policies, sees the notification as you enter the property, realizes that firearms are prohibited, we frequently will check in guns through our security department and keep them in a safe while the guest stays with us. Really, this bill is more designed for the person who is not law-abiding. And I think some of the suggestions or scenarios outlined in the question are probably good points for discussion. We want to discourage people from bringing firearms onto the property and possessing them while they're on the property. If there are reasonable modifications to the bill that permit somebody to store them either in a vehicle, I don't know if that's desirable, but either that or checking them with a property that prohibits them. I think those types of things are certainly worthy of a discussion. And as I said, it's a scenario we already deal with. So I don't know if that was responsive or helpful, but I'm happy to expand if necessary.
Thank you for that, Mr. McManus. I think the difference is, though, now we say that for your first offense, you're guilty of a misdemeanor. Second offense, a gross misdemeanor. So for a concealed weapons permit holder that, is new to Nevada, maybe didn't see it on, they know that they can't have it in the hotel, but they leave it in their car. I'm really worrying too about the punitive side of the legislation as well as some other things. But thank you for giving me so much time, Chair. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Assemblywoman Hanson. We're going to go next to Assemblyman O'Neill and then Assemblywoman Marzola. So please go ahead, Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair, and happy St. Patrick's Day to you. I think the question either to Assemblywoman Howdiggy or maybe Mr. McManus, if this is an opt-in, we already have the law that says private enterprise, private businesses can refuse entry to someone with a firearm. Why do we need the first section of this law, of this policy?
And I'll start, Mr. McManus, and if you want to, I see that you unmuted, so I know you have some remarks to make as well, which is great. Mr. O'Neill, thank you for the question. Assemblywoman Sandra Howdiggy for the record. This allows properties who opt in to lean on law enforcement. Someone is trespassing on their property with a firearm and they've opted into this legislation, they can now lean on law enforcement for removal of that person who is trespassing. And Mr. McManus?
Yep. For the record, John McManus. That's exactly right. Although currently property owners are permitted to exclude people with guns or set other rules and exclude people, there's really no teeth to it. And there's probably not a lower priority law enforcement than somebody violating a trespass notice. And again, as we think about the bill and the possible enforcement of it, there's also always discretion among law enforcement and prosecutors on what to pursue. And I think the person who innocently brings a firearm onto the property, learns of the rule, and then tries to do the right thing to figure out what to do with it is probably very unlikely to be prosecuted. But the person who brings the weapon onto the property, tries to conceal it, is aware of it. This gives us teeth to deal with that person. And really up and down the strip, I don't know that I'm aware of a property that does not have a sign on the door that says firearms prohibited. And we saw what happened this summer when we had certain parts of the criminal element deciding that the strip was a good place to hang out when everything else was closed, and bringing weapons on freely. And really all we can do is ask them to leave. And then they come back the next day or later the same night. There's not much that can be done, at least by putting some criminal sanction behind it when it's knowingly violated. It, in my estimation, decreases the likelihood that somebody who might not be setting out to commit a crime such as a robbery, but somebody who just is carrying a weapon for less than honorable reasons might decide that, hey, it's not a good idea to bring my weapon into a casino or somewhere else where there's potentially a criminal sanction. And really, in other parts of the country, there are laws, including in the West, laws that prohibit possession of firearms and places that serve alcoholic beverages and other things. So it's really designed to lower the risk of the bad outcome when somebody who might lawfully own a weapon but doesn't possess it for good reason brings it into a property where a property owner does not want it.
Not to sound argumentative, Mr. McManus, also happy St. Patrick's Day to you too, sir. The question I've got is, what I'm hearing is you had an increase of crime along the Strip. Metro has increased their enforcement or presence on the Strip, and I think some of that crime has dissipated or gone down. Are you saying that Metro will not respond to the casinos along the Strip if you have a person on there who is, you tell them to leave, they're trespassing, criminal trespassing, and Metro won't respond to you?
I'm saying it's a trespass violation. It is a relatively low priority of law enforcement. I'm not a member of law enforcement, so I think you probably have some members of law enforcement testifying later today. I'm sorry, John McManus for the record. That it is not a high priority, and at that point, particularly, look, the reality is when these calls are made, it's usually somebody who is causing a disturbance or trouble or is doing something suspicious that causes us to do more than simply say, would you mind leaving? When people leave, it's usually fine. When they don't, now if at this point they've committed a crime, it gives law enforcement greater basis to interact with them and to question them and to determine, what their intentions are, what their purpose of having the weapon on the property is. Well, right now, really, if they decide to walk out the door, that's where the interaction ends. All you can do with a current trespass is ask somebody to leave. There's no other sanction. And I don't know if that is helpful or not. And I think your question might be better directed to law enforcement.
And I appreciate that. I did 40 years in law enforcement. I'm currently authorized under federal law, HR 218, to carry a firearm, which was going to lead to my next part. Is this going to bring confusion if I'm walking down the Strip, go to one place that refuses or allows, then another place? When do I carry? It's a federal law. And are we trying to solve an issue in Las Vegas on the Strip that it's going to influence Elko, Tonopah, et cetera? I've worked for years and I've been approached by people. I run into people that I arrest regularly, unfortunately, here in Carson City. And I'll be honest with you, I'll say this, I may or may not carry, but I feel like now I'm going to run into people and that have threatened me. I've got some in custody. If they ever escape, I will move my family because they have vowed to kill me. And I feel like I'm losing that protection that I have that is given to me by the federal government. So that's a statement, I guess, if you'd like to comment, Assemblywoman Howdy. But I do have a question for Mr. Lindley on the various laws throughout the country.
Thank you for Assemblymember O'Neill. And this in no way is prohibiting you from carrying with your CCW license. This in no way stops what you currently already do. This only changes, the only change that this is making is that for businesses who choose to opt into this piece of legislation, some of them who may already have the practice of prohibiting firearms on their property, it changes a trespass into a criminal trespass so that they can lean on law enforcement. It just puts, like Mr. McManus said, teeth behind an already existing policy. So this in no way impacts you in what your current day-to-day practice is.
We may agree to disagree. I understand part of your answer and I understand it. But when I'm into those buildings where the company has said I can't carry and run into a group of people, I do feel threatened and concerned for my safety. There's other things besides firearms that are extremely dangerous weapons. So, but Chair, may I ask Mr. Lindley one quick question, please?
Yes, go ahead, Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you for the time. Mr. Lindley, and the various laws you've mentioned throughout the various states, and the most famous one is always to pick on Illinois and Chicago, where they have some of the most strictest gun laws among the 50. Have any of these laws decreased gun violence? Because I look at Chicago and every weekend they outnumber almost everybody else in shootings, let alone homicides.
So Steve Lindley with Brady, thank you for the question, Assemblymember. So Chicago and Illinois have some unique issues that they have to overcome, especially with the surrounding states and localities from Chicago and Illinois having very lax gun laws as compared to, say, the city of Chicago. But what we've seen here in California is that over the last 20 years, with more stricter gun laws, we have seen a reduction in overall firearm violence. And we also have to talk about suicides as well as firearm violence. And California has seen a sharp decrease for the last 25 years when it comes to suicides for the use of firearms.
Can any of that be attributed to awareness in mental health facilities, the suicide hotlines? Or are you strictly saying the gun laws, restriction of firearms, has decreased suicides by firearm?
Again, Steve Lindley with Brady. I don't think there's any one piece of the puzzle that's going to solve the problem. I think it is a conglomeration of issues. But the first part of that is just admitting that you do have a problem and seek different strategies in order to solve that problem and reduce victimization, reduce suicides, and overall reduce gun violence in your communities.
I appreciate the response, Mr. Lindley, I do. Thank you, Chair, for the time. Mr. McManus, I may be talking to you offline if I may, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman O'Neill, and certainly would encourage members ask questions offline. This is the first step in this process. Assemblywoman Howdiggy is available. I'm sure our other presenters are available as well, so certainly would invite you to do that. We're going to continue with questions at this time. I'm going to go next to Assemblywoman Marzola.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure who this question is directed to. I can start with Assemblywoman Howdiggy. Thank you so much for the presentation. And I think others have made this point. So in your amendment, section 2, subsection 1, the part where a person shall not possess a firearm on a covered premises without written consent, that's already in statute, correct?
That's a great question. Mr. McManus, do you know if under your property policies, if you provide written consent, can people be in possession of a firearm on your property?
Currently?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, John McManus for the record. Under Nevada law, if you have a proper permit, you can carry a weapon onto a property, but property owners have rights as well, and they can exclude you if you don't follow, various rules, and they're permitted to establish a rule that firearms and weapons are not permitted on the property. So we can exclude them through our rights, general rights as a property owner. But right now, to my knowledge, there's nothing in Nevada law that stops you from carrying a firearm, a legal firearm, into a casino environment, if that was the question.
Mr. McManus, right now, do you guys give written permission? I think that was part of Ms. Marzola's question.
Yeah, and I'll clarify that. So, and I may be reading it wrong. This is definitely a new space for me. So NRS 202.3673, section 4D says a permittee from carrying a concealed firearm while he or she is on the premises of a public building is permitted if they have received written permission from the person who controls the property. So the law is already there, correct?
John McManus for the record. I'm not familiar with the provision that you just read, so I don't. Is it a criminal provision?
It's just who's authorized as a carry concealed firearm CCW holder. And I guess my question was going to be, if you are a licensee holder, a CCW licensee holder, do you know the do's and don'ts, right? Like, you can't carry a gun to a public school. You can't carry a gun to a public airport. You can't go into a premises without written permission. Would they already know those set of rules if you're a holder of a CCW license?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Marzola. This is Assemblywoman Howdigee, Sandra Howdigee for the record. And I think it's the responsibility of the people who carry guns, Ms. Marzola, to be familiar with the laws of the state.
Okay.
And not just those who carry, not just those who are licensees, but those who open carry as well. It's their responsibility as gun owners to be familiar with the laws of the state.
Okay. Thank you.
And I can just add to that, you know, to get a CCW in the state of Nevada, you have to take a course that includes a live training element, but there is a classroom portion of that course. And part of that classroom portion covers where you can and cannot have firearms in the state of Nevada, as well as when you can act in self-defense, which is always a difficult area and very factually specific. But that area is covered in CCW courses. I would anticipate if we were to process this legislation and make changes that the curriculum would be adopted. But I do remember very clearly that, you know, part of the training was that you have an obligation to be familiar with the laws of the state, not just Nevada, but when you travel out of state. So that information is available for CCW holders. You know, what they might do after the course and whether they may retain that information, I think, is another question, but it is typically provided at the time of the course. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Chair. It is, and that's what I was trying to get at. If I have a license, I already, you know, should know the rules. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Do we have additional questions from committee members? If you could show me, raise your hand in some fashion. Let's go to Assemblywoman Hardy next.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. So my question is just kind of a little bit more around the permission. So if someone's going to get permission, like, who would they ask? Is it a manager, a CEO? Like, who would you know to ask? And then who keeps that? Does the individual keep it? Does the property keep it? Is it you have to get it every time you go back to the property? If someone could answer that.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Hardy, for your question. This is Assemblywoman Sandra Howdigee, and those seem like appropriate questions to ask and reasonable modifications that we can make. You know, what is that going to look like? What is that company's policy going to look like? What this legislation does is just add the criminal component to it, so that properties could rely on law enforcement if someone is criminal trespassing. But if we do need to put more clarification in the legislation to make members feel more comfortable as to what written notification will look like, Assemblywoman Cohen made the suggestion of including emails, and if a written notification is going to be a single use or multiple permission notification, then that's something that I'm willing to work with you on as well, what those written permissions look like.
Okay, because I can just, as you go through the list here of like a golf course, a movie theater, a shopping mall, I don't, just like if someone, just a regular citizen, you're be running around trying to get permission for these things. I just think it could be kind of confusing, pretty confusing. And then if I just have one more question, if that's okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay, and then it also says that law enforcement officer or security officer can carry a firearm as part of his official duties, his official capacity. So does that mean if the law enforcement officer is off duty, then they wouldn't be able to have their weapon?
That's a great clarification. I know that in the language right now, it currently states, Assemblywoman Sandra Howdigee for the record, it currently states that any law enforcement officer acting in an official capacity and any hired armed security guard are exempt. But if we need to further clarify, because right now it doesn't, if they are not acting in official capacity, then they would not be in an exempt capacity. And if I could also, Chair Yeager, I did get some clarification on the NRS that Assemblywoman Marzola referenced. We had an opportunity to look it up, and that provision only applies to public buildings, not private buildings. So courthouses, childcare facilities, et cetera, it wouldn't apply to private buildings.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee. And given that we're about 9:15 at this point, I'm going to stop taking questions. I realize there may be more out there, but I do want to invite members to follow up after the hearing. It is important to me that we get through as much testimony as possible on this bill. So here's sort of the lay of the land in terms of what we're going to do for testimony. Before I get there, Assemblywoman Howdigi and the presenters, thank you for presenting, and we'll ask you just to sit tight through the testimony, and then we'll come back for concluding remarks. So given the time, what we're going to do is we're going to take 40 minutes of testimony in support, 40 minutes of testimony in opposition, and 10 minutes for neutral, because we only have a couple of folks who have indicated that they're neutral on the bill, and then we'll go to concluding remarks. Again, before we get to testimony, just want to remind everybody, whether you're on the Zoom or whether you're on the phone, we're asking you to limit your remarks to 2 minutes. That's so we can get through as much testimony as possible. So if you are agreeing with things that have been said, it's perfectly fine to just indicate that. You don't have to use the entire 2 minutes. And also a reminder that to please keep your comments to the policy that is in the bill. Understand this is an issue that folks are passionate about, but we need to make sure we're being respectful of one another. So it's my job as chair to make sure that we have a fair and respectful hearing, and all of you could help out in that process today. So at this time, I'm going to open it up for testimony in support of Assembly Bill 286. I think that's the right number. And we have some folks on the Zoom with us who are here in support today. So I'm going to take testimony from our individuals on Zoom today, and I'll just probably call you out because that's going to be the easiest. So if we could go ahead and take testimony from Mr. Mason at this time, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Todd Mason with Wynn Resorts in Las Vegas. I'll be brief, only wish to echo the comments that our colleague, Mr. McManus, made in support of the bill, and also thank the Assemblywoman for taking on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comments, Mr. Mason. We're going to go next to, let's get everyone on my screen here if I can. Let's take testimony next from Mr. Sullivan, please.
Good morning, committee. My name is Jim Sullivan, Jimsullivan, and I represent the Culinary Workers Union Local 226. Sorry about that. Good morning. My name is Jim Sullivan, Jimsullivan, and I represent the Culinary Workers Union Local 226. The Culinary Union supports AB 286 because allowing firearms at our casinos and hotels is a worker safety issue. While the Culinary Union supports legal and responsible gun ownership, we also believe all workers deserve to be protected from gun violence at work, and AB 286 will help make that a reality. AB 286 would not discourage or prevent legal gun ownership. Rather, the bill includes common sense measures which give businesses the option to protect their employees and guests from gun violence in their own facilities. During the October 1st shooting in 2017, thousands of Culinary Union members saw firsthand the effects of gun violence. 5 Culinary Union members were injured in the mass shooting, and countless other workers suffered PTSD after the tragic incident. The Culinary Union wants to ensure that no other hospitality worker ever has to experience that trauma again. Gun violence on the Las Vegas Strip and downtown could also threaten the economic recovery Nevada desperately needs. On the 1-year anniversary of COVID-19, the Culinary Union still has approximately 50% workers unemployed as the state's #1 industry. Hospitality was hardest hit during this pandemic. Economic recovery won't be possible without workers getting back to work and being safe while at work. AB 286 will protect workers and accelerate Nevada's economic recovery. Lastly, I would like to say that our support We fully support Assemblywoman Haragi's amendment to this for trade shows. And that is a big part of our support going forward. And we are in full support of the amendment as well. So the Culinary Union urges you to support and pass AB 286. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Mr. Sullivan. Sticking with our folks on the Zoom, I would like to go next to Ms. Parson, who I think is Ms. Parsons. So please go ahead with your testimony.
Great, thank you. Good morning. My name is Chelsea Parsons. I'm the Vice President of Gun Violence Prevention Policy at the Center for American Progress. I'm here today to express our support for AB 286 and to urge its swift passage. Nevada has been the site of both tremendous tragedy and significant progress when it comes to gun violence. Las Vegas was the site of the worst mass shooting in modern U.S. history, and the state's been home to one of the most notorious standoffs between armed violent extremists and federal law enforcement officers, which, an event that foreshadowed the recent rise in violent anti-government extremism. Nevada experiences some of the highest rates of gun violence in the nation, with the 14th highest rate of firearm deaths from 2009 to 2018, and has a gun suicide rate that is 60% higher than the national average. But Nevada has also been a bright spot on the map when it comes to enacting strong new gun laws in the wake of tragedy. And AB 286 will continue to build on this progress and address two significant gaps in state law that continue to leave Nevada communities vulnerable to gun violence. First, the bill will ban ghost guns, homemade guns that are untraceable and can be acquired without a background check. The easy availability of parts, kits, and online instructions to make guns at home without a background check undermines the law requiring background checks for all gun sales that was enacted by voters just a few years ago. And the fact that these guns, which are indistinguishable in function from completed firearms that are purchased from gun dealers, are made without serial numbers or any other identifying markers, means they are untraceable if they're used in violent crime, making it much more difficult for law enforcement to identify perpetrators. Ghost guns are yet another example of the gun industry innovating to increase its profit at the expense of public safety. Like bump stocks, the dangerous gun accessory that was used in the 1 October shooting, ghost guns pose a risk to Nevada communities and should be banned. Second, AB 286 would give local Nevada businesses and other premises the ability to choose to prohibit guns on their property. This provision is quite simple. It affords the covered premises the freedom to be able to control whether guns may be brought onto the property. It's not a mandate. It creates an opt-in system that leaves the decision solely to the owner of the business. Businesses and other premises across the state have widely different needs and safety concerns, and this measure will simply allow them to make their own decisions regarding firearms on the premises on an individual basis. Both of the provisions in this bill are narrowly tailored to address specific public safety concerns and are well within the scope of permissible constitutional regulation of firearms as articulated by Justice Scalia in the Heller decision. I want to thank Assemblywoman Howdigi for your leadership on these issues and for the members of the committee for allowing me the opportunity today to express our support for AB 286.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Parsons. I did want to note for our committee secretary that Assemblywoman Kasama has joined us, so please mark her as present. I believe we have at least one more individual on the Zoom to testify in support, and that would be Ms. Magnus. So Ms. Magnus, if you'd like to turn your camera on, unmute yourself, and please provide your testimony.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Annette Magnus, and I am the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. Today, I'm here as a proud second-generation Native Nevadan, a gun owner, and to represent the 20,000 subscribers to our Battleborn Progress network statewide. We have been consistent on this issue. Better gun laws are needed for the state of Nevada, and today you heard the facts that back that up. That is why we support AB 286, and we thank the Assemblywoman for her continued courage and leadership on this issue. So much has happened since the last time I testified on a bill like this. A year ago today, I was feeding people out of my garage and watching a global pandemic sweep through our communities. Today, what we have seen because of that pandemic and the political discourse is that there is that panic buying of weapons all across this country, and right here in Nevada is out of control. Nevada also is tragically the site of the worst mass shooting in modern history. With this bill, we can finally address that shooting in a real way. The very least we can do is allow businesses and other places in our community to opt in if they do not want guns on their property. We have seen countless incidents on the Strip including one at the Fashion Show Mall the day that the SHOT Show started across the street from where it was being held. What message does that send to people who are visiting our state? This bill will also stop the proliferation of ghost guns, a troubling new trend amongst violent extremists and those who seek to skirt other gun safety laws that we have worked hard to help pass in the state of Nevada, or simply traffic guns in our community. Assembling unfinished gun parts without serial numbers allows for untraceable deadly weapons to end up in the hands of those who shouldn't have them. Today, you will hear arguments that this somehow takes away the rights of gun owners. As a gun owner, I reject that. These are deeply flawed arguments. Supporting better gun laws makes me a better gun owner. I didn't buy my gun from a shady internet company. I went to a local gun store and I passed a background check. If you follow the rules, this bill will not impact you at all. As a gun owner, I make it a priority to know the laws of this state and follow them. My HOA has a sign on their door that says that I am not allowed to take my gun inside. Therefore, I don't take my gun inside. It's that simple. There is overwhelming support for these policies in Nevada and across the country, as polling has consistently shown us. Nevadans want and expect you all to enact stronger gun laws during this session, and we are asking all of you in this body to support this critical bill today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Magnus. I don't believe we have anyone else on the Zoom in support, but if I'm incorrect about that, if you are on the Zoom and you'd like to testify in support, if you could unmute yourself, turn your camera on and let me know, because I don't want to overlook anybody. And we'll give everyone a moment just to do that. Okay, I don't see additional supportive testimony on the Zoom. VPS, it is time to go to the phone lines. Let's please go there and ask folks who are in support to get into the queue, and we'll take as many callers as we can. When the first one is ready, let's please tee that person up and take testimony in support.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 286, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. We will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 024. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Yeager and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Elizabeth Becker, ELIZABETH and I'm speaking as a volunteer on behalf of Moms Demand Action's Nevada chapter. I would first like to thank Assemblywoman Hadeghi for bringing the Keep Nevada Safe bill to the legislature. After the devastation visited upon our community in October 2017, this legislative body passed the background check law and extreme risk protection orders during the 80th session to keep us all safer and to keep guns out of the hands of those intending to harm themselves or others. In the past few years, a grave new threat has emerged, the proliferation of so-called ghost guns. These weapons have no serial numbers and cannot be traced by law enforcement. They skirt background check law by purporting to be unfinished. Purchasers can buy parts of guns online and assemble them at home, no background check needed. Just 3 months ago, ATF raided Polymer 80, located just outside where you sit in Carson City, for knowingly selling weapons without background checks, among several other charges. States across the country have discovered weapons at crime scenes and traced them back to Nevada. In California, the ATF states that more than 30% of guns recovered from crime scenes are ghost guns, and that number is rising rapidly. AB 286 addresses the problem of ghost guns head on. I have been a member of Moms Demand Action for almost 7 years. I know that no one law will ever prevent all gun crime and the unnecessary and crippling suffering it brings to families. But I do know this. Giving up and allowing bad actors to obtain weapons more easily than registering a vehicle is not an option. We must stop arming those who wish to harm us, and AB 286 is a step in the right direction, and I urge your support for its passage. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Becker. BPS, let's take the next caller in support, please.
Next caller with the last three digits of 504. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin. Caller, please press *6 to unmute yourself and begin your testimony. We will move on to the next caller. Oh, go ahead, caller.
I don't know how to rescind my position. I'm actually calling in opposition.
Thank you, caller.
That's fine.
We will move on to the next caller.
If you could just stay on the line, and then we'll take opposition in a little bit, and you'll be able to participate then. So BPS, let's take the next caller in support, please.
Next caller with the last three digits of 305. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Yeager and members of the Assembly Judiciary. For the record, my name is Carl Catarata, K-A-R-L, last name Catarata, C-A-T-A-R-A-T-A. I'm a survivor of gun violence living in Nevada, and on June 2014, my family and I survived the shooting that killed two brave Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department officers at a local CC's Pizza right before they killed another civilian at a local Walmart. So I pulled my mom and brother out of that Walmart before they started opening fire, and many Nevadans remember that day, and many Nevadans think about their safety when it comes to visiting their favorite business. Look, when I'm a survivor of gun violence, I come from a family of responsible gun owners. When it comes to responsible gun ownership, I was taught two things. Buy responsibly, not by constructing a ghost gun, and use only when it is the dire last resort of protection to stand your ground. While we have different viewpoints on guns, I think we can all come to common ground that we all want Nevada to be a safe place to live in. That's where AB 286 comes in, whether that's visiting a store, a restaurant, or my family visiting our local Walmart for groceries. From where I see it, we all want to create a Nevada that empowers business owners to create a space where customers feel safe to do business. This bill allows that. I hope that in your vote for this bill, you think deeply and intentionally about the lives that it will impact years from now. Survivors of gun violence like myself, victims of domestic abuse, veterans, and those living with PTSD. Thank you so much for your time and consideration and for listening to Nevadans who have survived gun violence and get to live another day to share their experience. Thank you and have a great Wednesday.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Catarata. BPS, let's take the next caller, please.
Next caller with the last three digits of 726. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
This is Christy Watson, K-R-I-S-T-E-E, Watson, W-A-T-S-O-N. Good morning, Chair Yeager and other members of the Judiciary. I am a mom, a gun owner, and a member of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. The increased presence of ghost guns in Nevada allows prohibited buyers access to firearms after it has already been determined they cannot be trusted with a weapon that sole purpose is to take life. The people of Nevada overwhelmingly support the background check law, so allowing ghost guns in Nevada is careless. A ghost gun ban is a logical step to protect my family, my neighbors, and those coming to visit our wonderful state. To that end, protecting our number one economic driver must be top of mind, particularly after we've experienced such a difficult year finding revenue to meet Nevada's budget. In addition, most of us know a survivor of the deadliest mass shooting in recent American history that occurred right here in our beloved state. For those reasons, casinos and other entertainment venues would welcome clarification for how to enforce the prohibition of firearms where the private businesses see fit. This is a free market response that allows a private business to protect their revenue, employees, and valued guests from loss. In closing, I'd like to thank Assemblywoman Jauregui for her brave, bold advocacy as a gun violence survivor. You know better than most that this legislation has the power to offer life-saving solutions. And I urge respected members of the Judiciary to vote in favor of moving AB 286 out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Watson. BPS, let's take the next caller in support.
Thank you. Next caller with the last three digits of 212. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller, please press *6 now, and you may begin your testimony.
Hello, my name is Kimmy Cole. That's spelled Kimicole. I am a gun owner, and I'm calling in support of AB 286 because this bill will help keep Nevada safe. The new phenomenon of ghost guns, or guns that are unregistered, unlicensed, untraceable, and dangerous, has to stop. Many of the online retailers who offer these guns have reported that the increase in demand has led them to being sold out. These guns are cheap and easy to get and can fall into the wrong hands way too easily. We must ensure that our communities are safe. Gun ownership should be responsible and upfront, not something that exists in a back room without any checks and balances. In addition, AB 286 allows businesses to opt in to prohibiting firearms at their venues. Businesses should feel empowered to choose whether or not they allow firearms at their facilities. This is undoubtedly one of the best ways to keep Nevada safe. This is also a measure that can prevent more mass shootings in our state. We want people to travel to Nevada. In fact, we need people to travel to Nevada as our state is dependent on tourism. Keeping Nevada safe is a guaranteed way of promoting more tourism. Gun violence is an epidemic across our nation, but Nevada has the opportunity to be a leader in fair, smart, and impactful legislation that protects our residents and businesses. I urge you to pass AB 286. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Cole. BPS, let's take the next caller in support.
We'll take the next caller with the last three digits of 827. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Fahima Caleb, spelled F as in Frank, A-H-I, M as in Mary, A-K-H-A-L, A, F as in Frank, and I'm calling in support of AB 286. As a small business owner of a business called Kelly Fano, we are constantly seeing the effects of tourism or the lack of tourism in our state, and safe gun laws would definitely help us increase. We saw the effects after October 1st of what happened to the decline in our business, and we also ask and request for our state legislatures to keep our team members safe, our businesses safe, and our families safe by enacting safety first gun laws. Thank you so much, and once again, I'm in support of this bill.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Caleb. BPS, let's take the next caller, please.
Thank you. Next caller with the last three digits of 242. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Yes, good morning. My name is Reverend Leonard Jackson. I'm the Executive Director for Faith Organizing Alliance. Being a retired military person, I am very familiar with firearms and the devastation that they could cause. So I stand in full support of AB 286, for we realize that only those that are looking to bypass the law or try to avoid submitting for a background check or illegal firearm searching for, those are the only ones that I could see or realize would need to go to ghost guns. We have an obligation to our community, and our obligation to the community is to provide a safe community for those that are visiting, those that are living here, and those that are visiting here. So I stress fully 199% to this committee to please pass AB 286 for our safety and our safety of our future. Thank you for taking this step forward. Be blessed.
Thank you for your testimony, Reverend Jackson. BPS, let's take the next caller, please.
Next caller with the last three digits of 979. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Emily Woodoff, E-M-I-L-Y, W-O-O-D as in dog, A-L-L. And I'm also a resident of Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'm testifying today in support of AB 286, and I'm testifying as a gun owner. The first time I discharged my weapon and felt the full power of my gun, I gained a really deep appreciation for the weight of responsibility that I carry as a gun owner. As a child, I grew up in school in a post-Columbine world where the threat of gun violence was and is real. And as an adult, I watched with horror as fellow Nevadans were gunned down right here on the Strip on 1 October. As a gun owner, I abide by all safety precautions when I store and I use my weapon, but it's clear that all too often that isn't the case, and too many lives have been lost because of it. I also know that being able to make my own weapons at home as a ghost gun or to carry my gun at businesses that would prefer me not to does little to protect me against bad actors. As weapons become more advanced and as they become easier to make at home, we must also adapt our laws to these changing situations because our responsibility to our fellow Nevadans as gun owners only deepens. So I'm here today to urge you guys to support AB 286, which will help keep Nevada safe.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Woodall. BPS, let's go to the next caller, please.
We will go with the next caller with the last 3 digits of 020. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 020, please press *6 to begin your testimony.
Hello, my name is Susan Profit. I live in Summerlin, Nevada. I am a gun owner. I am a rape survivist. I was raped in a Marriott hotel when I was traveling on business in 1994, and I never travel without a gun. If you make it illegal for me to be able to protect myself from criminals,
Ma'am,
well,
we are
then
in support.
you've made me a
We are
criminal.
in support of the bill. If you want to offer opposition testimony, we're not quite there yet, so I'd ask you to hold off. We're still in support of the bill.
I'm for the bill. I'm for it. Hey, listen, I'm for the bill if you want to know where the guns are, but I am not for you making it illegal for me to be able to have a gun. This is against the Constitution. I'm not taking it. Not from you, not from anybody. Patriots,
BPS,
we need
next
to
caller,
stop this.
please.
This is crazy.
We'll take the next caller and support BPS. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Next caller with the last 3 digits of 685. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Yeager and other members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Marissa Morano, and I'm a volunteer and gun violence survivor fellow with the Nevada chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. As a survivor of Route 91, the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history, I do not only support, but I am filled with gratitude for AB 286. Since October 1st, 2017, I experienced extreme hypervigilance to loud noises, and I am extremely aware of my surroundings. Everywhere I go, I must identify the nearest exit and create an escape plan in my head. A few months ago, I was grocery shopping at Smith's. I was looking at the vitamins when a woman walked by with a big black gun attached to her hip. I froze. I became dizzy. I struggled to breathe. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I just couldn't do anything but be frozen. I knew what was happening. I was having a panic attack. I wanted to stop, but it didn't. I got angry. I couldn't find my child or my partner. I stood there waiting for her to leave, spinning, trying to take deep breaths. I wanted it to stop. When will she shoot? Bullets, shots, bam, bam. These words raced through my mind as I stood frozen. I thought I was getting better, but this is my reality. The reality that this will happen no matter how strong I get until we pass legislation that makes it safe to be at grocery stores. AB 286 will support my safety and my community's safety. The women will never know the effects of what happened to me that day, but I will. You may not understand the effects of what my life is like as a survivor of gun violence, but my children, friends, and family understand. They too want to be safe from guns at a grocery store. Please pass AB 286 so this can be the last of the many instances of my world spinning. AB 286 will protect us all and will ensure that law enforcement has the tools they need to enforce this law. Thank you for your time and safety of our community.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Ms. Morano. BPS, let's take the next caller in support, please.
On to the next caller with the last three digits of 208. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. My name is Elaine Sanchez, spelled Elaine, last name Sanchez, Sanchez. Good morning, Chairman Yeager, and to the members of the Judiciary. My name is Elaine Sanchez, and I'm a Nevada resident who lives in Las Vegas and is a community member. I am in support of legislation AB 286, which I believe will make our community and businesses stronger. As economic tourism is our lifeblood, we must create protocols that allow for a more secure environment. This legislation empowers businesses, places of worship, and untold other businesses to create a higher standard of safety. It allows flexibility and gives business owners the choice, the right to decide how it wants to conduct its businesses. It is simply an opportunity for a business to decide what it must do for itself. To allow business owners to opt in is to provide a higher standard of safety for employees, for community members, for the businesses itself. It also helps a relationship. It helps connect a relationship with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department or any police department that needs to assist a business owner should something go awry. There's absolutely nothing wrong with allowing the business community to make a choice for its own good. This legislation is preventative. All these measures are preventative. They do not disallow a person from gaining a gun or wanting to have a gun, but it does provide more security for our state. And as we all know, unfortunately, due to the pandemic and because we have seen gun violence in our communities beforehand, we are in need of preventative measures. And so I want to say that it is important to understand also regarding ghost guns that a gun receiver is part of the firearm that houses the mechanical components and projects and projects the bullet. Someone using a finished receiver could assemble a functioning firearm by adding necessary additional parts, such as the stock, barrel, trigger component, and magazine. An individual interested in avoiding a background check and gun registration process can instead buy an unfinished receiver, also known as 80% blank or partial receiver, to make a ghost gun. Why would we, as a state, allow that to occur? Who are the individuals who would want to purchase a gun but yet not go through a check? I think this measure is absolutely common sense. And I believe it's important to realize that unregulated receivers can be converted into working firearms by someone with very basic skills and tools. And it's important to know who people are if they are purchasing guns. It is important to go through the background check. So I am in full support of Bill 286 as a preventative measure. And I believe that businesses should make their own decisions. I also believe that it's important to go through the process correctly when you're trying to purchase a gun. And I want to thank the Judiciary. I would like to thank Assemblywoman Hagide for all her hard work in this matter. And I fully support this as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter, and as a business owner. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Sanchez. BPS, let's take the next caller in support.
Thank you. Next caller with the last three digits of 445. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Yeager and members of the committee. I am Teresa Crawford, TERESA CRAWFORD, a volunteer with the Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, Nevada chapter. I really want to thank Assemblywoman Sandra Hardige for all the wonderful work she's done to help keep Nevada safe in the last legislature and with this bill, and for the presenters for strong and clear evidence-based analysis of the two components of this bill. I also quickly want to recognize the mass shooting yesterday. 8 people died, 7 women, 6 Asian, and they died senselessly. And it's the third mass shooting in the nation this year. And we're always thinking about 1 October 2017. And since then, the Strip has continued to see gun violence that affects employees and tourists and locals and always makes national news. Currently, rules for business owners to prohibit guns on their property are unclear and lack teeth. There's even a chart I've seen, right? A reporter posted it yesterday that actually encourages gun carriers to ignore the no firearm signs on private businesses because at most there will be a trespassing charge, not any kind of weapons violation. Section 2 of this bill codifies firearm prohibition rules for all venues and businesses and gives law enforcement officers the means to enforce them. As pandemic restrictions ease, Nevadans, including seniors and families with children, look forward to shopping, dining out, and attending movies, concerts, and church in safety or any place of worship. From pizzerias to resort properties, this bill empowers business owners to offer firearm prohibited premises to their customers. Hotels and motels may just provide a document with language or anything they want to do that goes beyond a simple sign to communicate with their guests. And as we've heard from the resort officials, they're quite happy to provide safes and a way to safely lock up and store firearms. The bill also covers hotel guests who purchase guns at trade shows. They just have to bring them unloaded in a bag and notify the hotel management. This bill empowers private businesses, makes all of this safe, bans the source of crime guns that are flowing from Nevada to other states, and continues the good work done for gun safety in the past legislature. And it is a uniquely Nevada solution that provides choice for businesses and consumers alike. Please vote yes on AB 286. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Crawford. BPS, let's take the next caller in support, please.
We will take the next caller with the last three digits of 463. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Yeager and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Christiane Brown with Brady, Nevada. I'm so grateful to Assemblywoman Howdegui and thank her for sponsoring this important bill. Ghost guns pose a serious threat to the safety of all Nevadans. There is no constitutional law that exists now or ever has that allows anyone's right to freedom to come at the cost of another one's right to safety. The unregulated use of ghost guns is one of the most urgent safety issues facing our state. These guns represent a rapidly expanding category of handmade firearm that is untraceable, is not subject to background checks, and is seriously undermining the gun safety laws that exist in our state. Ghost guns have become a go-to favorite of a large class of criminals like domestic abusers, drug traffickers, and violent white supremacists. But they are also being purchased and used by children who are too young to legally buy firearms. Dangerous do-it-yourself ghost gun kits supply everything a purchaser needs to build a fully functional and deadly firearm. But as untraceable weapons, they leave law enforcement without the critical evidence they need to do their jobs. Make no mistake, ghost guns are not a creative hobby for DIY crafters. They are deadly weapons that look, feel, shoot, and kill exactly like traditional firearms, and therefore they must be regulated as such. But ghost gun manufacturers and owners will tell us that ghost guns are not real firearms simply because they come unassembled. This is absurd. Ghost gun manufacturers are enabling their clients to build untraceable firearms that are subject to no laws. People who want ghost guns to remain legal are people who demand rights without responsibility. Responsible gun owners do not need untraceable weapons. Responsible gun owners register their firearms legally, and responsible gun owners purchase their weapons from licensed sellers. AB 286 closes a dangerous loophole ghost gun manufacturers have created and their owners have taken advantage of. It is time for Nevada to join several states and immediately act to pass AB 286's ban on unregistered ghost guns and their parts. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Brown. BPS, let's go ahead and take one last caller in support.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We will go with the caller with the last three digits of 048. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin. Go ahead, caller, with the last 3 digits of 048. Caller, you may now begin your testimony.
Hi, my name is Margie Feldman, MargieFeldman. I live in the very safe city of Henderson in the beautiful and safe community of Sun City Anthem, where I'm representing the Sun City Anthem Democratic Club, which is the largest Democratic club in the state. We are in strong support of AB 286. Most of my friends and neighbors picked Henderson, Nevada because of it being a safe place to live and play with its close proximity to the Strip. Obviously, that environment has changed, especially since 1 October and with the increased crime on the Strip this summer. At the same time, we have all seen hate crimes increasing dramatically over the last years, with drastic increases in 2020 alone. For all of these reasons, and the ability to want to have visitors and tourism restored in our state, we strongly support and appreciate everyone's support of AB 286. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony and support, Ms. Feldman. We have now taken 40 minutes of testimony in support. So as advertised, I'm going to close testimony in support at this time, recognizing that there are still individuals in the phone line who would like to provide supportive testimony. To you all, I apologize, and I ask you to please provide your comments in writing or by email. I know that you know how to do that because we've been getting a lot of those emails already, but thank you for being part of this process. At this time, I'm going to open up for testimony in opposition. Much like we did for support, we have some individuals with us on the Zoom today in opposition. So I'm going to start here with the Zoom. I think we have 3 or 4. So Mr. Reed, if you are there, could you please, I see you turn your camera on, please unmute and provide your testimony in opposition, please.
Sure, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for the record, Dan Reed, D-A-N-R-E-I-D. I'm Western Regional Director with National Rifle Association's Institute for Legislation. I'm here on behalf of our Nevada NRA members in strong opposition to AB 286, and I'll do my best to stick to our short time frame here on this very complicated bill. And there's a lot to unpack, and as you heard, there's a ton of questions surrounding how this bill actually works, and I'll try and go through each section as briefly as possible. But so looking at Section 2 and regarding this ban on covered premises, as was clearly stated, private property owners do have the ability under existing law to set their own policies. And if someone is trespassing, they have the ability to remove them, to contact law enforcement. And so they already have this authority right now. And we've heard from the proponents of this bill that this is actually putting teeth. And so what you're actually hearing is we're wanting to have law enforcement take their finite amount of resources to respond to nonviolent calls. And a lot of this seems to be targeted at Nevada's more than 143,000 concealed carry permit holders. These are people that have been licensed, trained, gone through background checks, and are authorized by their county sheriff, not to mention the 27 other states that we do recognize their permits. CCW holders are amongst the most law-abiding people in this country. And it's really a shame that they're going to have to go out and plot out their course for any day running errands to try and navigate who they have permission from, whether they're going to run into the sporting goods store, to the shopping mall, or perhaps they're having lunch at a certain hotel, restaurant, etc. So this is really disappointing. As far as this bill in the teeth, it actually goes beyond that. And we start to get into people's homes when you look at how they can actually carry and how it's limited to a residential unit owner. If they're part of maybe a golf course community where they have a residential unit, they own it. They can only have it in their house. So imagine this residential unit owner wants to go walk their dogs at night. They're a CCW holder and they want to cruise through the golf course. This is prohibited under this law. They could be facing criminal consequences. Or what about lessees, renters who may be renting back from a residential unit owner. I don't see how the exceptions work for them. Or what about an owner that wants to go down and do their laundry in a common area at night? This is prohibited under this bill. I just wanted to make one note also on this. I believe I heard one of the hotels talking about taking possession of patron guns. I do want to refer back to our background check law regarding private transfers. I think that is actually prohibited, and I think that should be clarified because they could be in violation of the law if they're actually taking people's guns without intervening a licensed dealer. I don't believe that's a covered exemption. Next, I want to move over to sections 3 through 5, which we've heard about. This is unfinished frames, receivers. This is a longstanding American tradition. People have been making their own firearms for personal use since before the Revolutionary War. This is completely legal for personal use. If you start getting into selling them, then you need to be a licensed seller. We heard a lot about these kits, but there's also other firearms that are out there that people have made before the kits. They've been doing this for a long time. How are these firearms going to be treated under this law? Are Nevadans going to be able to continue to possess these? Are they going to face criminal penalties? There's a lot of issues with that. Also, there are firearms that do not require serial numbers. And I want you to think about this. The first offense under this bill is a gross misdemeanor. Second is a felony. Imagine you have a grandparent who has a gun collection, and one of the traditions for passing on these family heirlooms is to gift a firearm in accordance with state laws, an interfamilial transfer when a grandkid becomes of age. And a couple of these firearms do not have serial numbers. They're not required to because they're pre-68. Is this grandparent going to run into an issue of possibly facing felony charges because he gifted one rifle to a grandchild on one day and one several months later? You have two instances. Are these grandchildren going to be facing gross misdemeanors themselves? Or maybe perhaps one of those grandkids lives out of state and he's totally fine, but his cousin is now going to be facing these criminal charges. There's a lot to unpack here. I know my time is limited. I will stand for any questions. I think there's a lot that could be cleared up on this. We're in strong opposition. We really encourage this committee to let's focus on criminal misuse. If you're a prohibited person, you cannot possess a firearm, whether you made it at home or not. That is illegal under law. And if you think about when law enforcement is going to discover a violation, if its intent is to go after bad actors, regardless of where the firearm came from, if it is in their possession, it's a felony, and let's prosecute them as such. With that, we're in opposition. I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. I did give you a little bit more time. We don't have a lot of time for questions, so what I'm going to do on the Zoom for our folks in opposition is just take one question for each. Members, I know you're going to have more, but I want to get to the phone lines to take opposition testimony as well. So for Mr. Reed, I have a question from Assemblyman.
I read this bill, and I know you're an attorney well-versed in gun law, so which is why I ask you this question. Someone living in an apartment obviously doesn't own that building. The way I read this bill, the owner of the building has to give permission. So if I live in an apartment in Douglas County and want to bring my gun into my house, do I have to get written permission from my landlord?
Mr. Chair, through you to Assemblyman Wheeler, I appreciate that question. And I think that depending on how you read this bill, and obviously there was an amendment that was posted just prior to committee, at least for the public, that we're still trying to digest. But I think there's some argument that may say it's unclear and how you would go about doing this and actually how that rent goes. I mean, there's a lot of analysis that goes into this bill, and that's really the shame with this is it becomes very unclear for our law-abiding citizens out there on how they're supposed to be able to exercise their inherent right to self-defense in the state of Nevada and comply with the laws this could be this massive patchwork throughout the state of dodging private property and how this looks. And when you start to get into parking lots and when would you actually discover that this place is a prohibited firearms place, right? And not to mention that there are no requirements on these private properties to provide any sort of security measures to keep out bad actors. There's no requirement for metal detectors, for security forces. I know that some of the hotels obviously have extensive measures that they put in place. but there's no guarantee. And if someone's rendered defenseless and an incident does happen because of a bad actor, there's really no liability protection for them and no real way for them to exercise that right to self-defense and be their first line of defense.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I will remind folks, members of the committee, members of the public who are listening in, this is indeed the first step of a process. A bill has to go through a lot of hoops to become a bill and be signed into law. So I didn't want to give anyone the impression that somehow this is going to be the final opportunity to comment or work on this piece of legislation. Indeed, this is the beginning of a process and not the end. I'm going to take testimony in opposition next from Mr. Finley, who is on the Zoom with us. Mr. Finley, if you could please go ahead and provide your testimony.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Yeager, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Michael Finley, Findlay. I am not Steve Lindley from California, and I won't be discussing California gun laws today. I'm representing the National Shooting Sports Foundation. We're the trade association for most firearm manufacturers, retailers, and ranges throughout the country. In Nevada, we have and we host and we own the SHOT Show, which many of you are aware of. And I'd like to speak to you a little bit about our SHOT Show today and how this bill potentially might have unintended consequences for our show, for our attendees, as well as for our vendors. A little bit about SHOT Show. We've had it consecutively every year, except for this past year because of COVID-19, in Las Vegas since 2010. Our show brings in roughly 70,000 people per year. We do over $130 million of direct economic value to the benefit to the Nevada economy every year. And unfortunately, AB 286, with the way as written, and again, we were only given the bill 24 hours in advance along with the public, and we have not been able to digest the 20-page amendment that was given to you all this morning. But the way that is written, it has a lot of unintended consequences for our show and essentially would be a logistical nightmare for our folks. And I want to go over a couple of examples of why it would be. In terms of lodging and offsite events, we simply cannot house 70,000 people plus their family members on one campus, on one location. Our attendees take almost every bed up in Nevada, or I'm sorry, in Clark County when we come to SHOT Show. This includes Airbnbs. This includes, the Marriott. This includes Days Inn. This includes the Sands properties. This includes MGM properties. This includes Caesar properties. With that diversity in lodging, our guys would have to obtain written permission from each owner or operator from every location when they're coming into town. In addition to that, there was a comment about inoperable firearms. And yes, our show does display inoperable firearms where people can touch, look at it, at our displayed products. But something that we also do, and we do this in conjunction with our manufacturers as well as law enforcement, and we do military days on this, is we have a range day where there are live fire exercises for our products. In those instances, there are real questions of whether the exemption for trade shows would work for us because we are transporting from safe locations, from safes on these premises to ranges and back. And it's not just one day, but it's throughout the entire week that we have live fire exercises and demonstrations going on. In addition to that, when a lot of our folks rent condos, they rent condos, they rent houses when they come in. A property management company, as this is written, does not constitute the owner, and there would be real questions whether or not they would be able to approve the request, the written consent that is required by this bill, to have our products there. Now, as I've said, we've had this for over 10 years. We have long-standing relationships. We love Vegas. Our guys are comfortable. Our men and women that attend the show are very comfortable in the town. They have a plan set. We're excited to come back next year. But if all of a sudden they show up and things have changed, all of a sudden restaurants, lodging locations have signs posted, because most of our attendees are from either out of state or even out of the country, there's real questions as to whether what they do in that situation. For instance, the way that this bill is written, we transport things through semis into Las Vegas. And if they were just to stop and grab gas, but that gas station had a sign posted, they could potentially be a criminal under this law because they've driven into the parking lot with a semi full of product that they intend to show at the SHOT Show. Those are just a couple of the unintended consequences. Also, I want to talk about part 2 of the bill, which would affect our SHOT Show as well. There isn't a definition under this language. This is a really highly technical issue, and I believe that it wasn't gone through by the supporters of this bill accurately. And I'll just give you an example. Under this bill, there isn't a clear definition of when that frame or receiver becomes a firearm. What determines that? Is it a cosmetic function on it? Is it intent? And then from that point, at what point would a manufacturer or a retailer need to comply with or treat that hunk of metal as a firearm? These questions are unclear. Through the manufacturing process, there are times where manufacturers will give the product to another contractor, essentially, to do things like paint jobs. Does that person now have to give an FFL because that hunk of metal that they are painting prior to going to a machinery or a factory to become a firearm is now considered a firearm under Nevada law? This is very inconsistent with federal law. Our industry follows federal and all state laws and is in complete compliance. But this would make Nevada, would cause a rift between Nevada law and federal law. I know I'm running out of time, but I would implore
Mr.
the
Finley,
committee,
if you could wrap up your comments, please.
Absolutely. I'd implore the committee to really do another hearing or learn more about the technical aspects of part 2 of the bill, because it's a very complicated aspect. And I'll leave you with this. The SHOT Show is very excited to come back. We had to take a 1-year hiatus because of COVID-19. We're excited to come back to Las Vegas. We're excited to be part of the continued growth, the economic prosperity that we're all clamoring for around the country, especially in Clark County. And we want to be there. This bill would be a logistical nightmare for us. And I just don't know how our folks would feel like this world-class customer service, attitude, tourism, economy that Nevada is, would be very excited or receptive to a bill where they have to jump through numerous hoops and a lot of red tape. I have a lot more to say of this. I know I'm out of time. Thank you, Chairman Yeager, members of the committee. I would just really say this is a logistical nightmare for us, and there are a lot of unintended consequences. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Finley. I do have one question for you from Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad you're here today because I do have a question specifically about the SHOT Show in 2019, which was the last one before the pandemic. I remember reading an article about like 65 guns and firearms being stolen and silencers, and I believe machine guns were among them. Rifles, handguns were stolen. And this was before the pandemic and what we've seen now on the Strip. I'm just curious, what role do you think the SHOT Show should have in like keeping guns out of the hands of the wrong people?
Thank you for that question. It's an important question. We are unequivocally against unauthorized access to any firearms. But we don't just say that. We put our money where our mouth is. We've invested in programs such as Child Project Safe, which gives free locks to law enforcement all over the country to distribute to communities. Thus far, we've given, since its inception over 20 years, we've given 25 million locks away. We do educational programs at SHOT Show and then ongoing throughout the year, designed to prevent unauthorized access to firearms, such as straw purchasing. We have a program, it's called Don't Lie for the Other Guy, and it's designed for retailers to identify people that come in, and there are telltale signs of people trying to purchase firearms for others. We have a litany of other programs. I know I'm out of time. I want to speak directly to that issue, though. And another unintended consequence of this bill is when you look at the data throughout the country, And respectfully, I'm going to disagree with the gentleman from California because the statistics are wrong. And I'm going to cite CDC statistics right now. Since California has put their laws in place, and we're talking from 2014 to 2019, according to CDC data, and all the laws that have come into place, he's technically right. Violent crime has dropped, and it has dropped from 2,942 deaths in California in 2014. And today, in 2019, the last date in which we have data for, the numbers were 2,945. So there was a 3-death difference. He spoke directly to suicide prevention. We have a program with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention right now that's gone into place, and we've seen suicides plateau. They're not where we want. They need to get lower, but we're working on that. The final part that I'll connect that portion with this bill is if a sign is posted, if a law-abiding citizen or one of our, which is also our retailers and vendors, find out that it is, they have little recourse but to leave a firearm in their car. What we have shown is that criminals get guns from theft, primarily from theft from consumers, not from firearm retailers. We are potentially setting up a situation where we are increasing the amount of firearms that we know criminals get through theft. The final thing is, in terms of our situation at SHOT Show, all the firearms were recovered. They were inoperable. We did not have the components required for them to be operable, and they were recovered within 3 to 5 days. We work with ATF all over the country. We put rewards out there for theft firearms from FFLs, often matching their reward upwards of $50,000, usually in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, depending on the case. So I know I've taken up a lot of time, but I hope I've answered your question, Assemblywoman, and I can follow up with you, or if you want to talk more about that, please let me know.
Thank you, and I would invite you to follow up offline on some of those points, and Mr. Finley would invite continued dialogue with the bill sponsor about some of the concerns that you raised. Again, this is the beginning of the process, not the end of the process. We're still on opposition testimony. I'm going to take Mr. Pirro next in opposition. Mr. Pirro, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Pirro from the Clark County Public Defender's Office, also testifying on behalf of the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. I'd like to thank Assemblywoman Hadegui for always working hard to keep Nevadans safe and for bringing this bill forward. We have a few issues for this bill, and we're hopeful that we can work these issues out and move us out of the opposition. Starting with our first issue in Section 2, Subsection 1, Mr. McManus stated that the goal of this is to catch people who knowingly violate the law. So what we're asking is if we can put the word knowingly in that sentence, a person shall not knowingly possess. We think that will add an intent element that will get rid of people who are making mistakes and saving those people who are making simple mistakes from becoming criminals. The second part is we do have an issue that both Assemblywoman Cohen and Assemblywoman Hardy brought up with the definition of covered premises. And we're hopeful that we could work that out and tweak some of the language. I feel like Director Chuck Calloway bringing up a hypothetical, but here goes my hypothetical. Let's say somebody travels from California here to Nevada and they come to the hotel. Well, they can not have the they cannot have the gun in the parking garage, but they also cannot have it in the hotel. So what is a lawful gun owner to do to make sure that they do not become a criminal? Well, they would have to park in a less safe area. And what we've seen here in Clark County is there are a lot of gun thefts that happen from automobiles. And so we need to work on a fix here with this language of covered premises so that lawful people aren't becoming criminals or parking their cars in less safe areas with their firearms inside. The last thing we have an issue with is the penalty schemes throughout the bill. In the beginning of the bill, in Section 1, the penalty scheme goes from first offense misdemeanor, second offense gross misdemeanor, third and subsequent offenses, category D felony. We would ask maybe if we could move to a category E felony that would provide diversion and stop collateral consequences, but also if we can create that penalty scheme throughout the bill, because the rest of the bill jumps from first offense gross misdemeanor to second offense felony. So what we're asking here is to change the penalty scheme a little bit. We're hoping that we could work with the bill sponsor, who Assemblywoman Hadegui is always easy to work with and listens to feedback, and we thank her for that, so that we can move out of the position of opposition because we do support the goals and aims of this bill to keep Nevadans safer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your testimony in opposition, Mr. Pirro. We have one final speaker on the Zoom with us by telephone, and that is Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblyman Ellison, if you're there, could you please unmute and provide your opposition testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to sneak in here above. I've got a couple questions. I'm filing in opposition. There's some areas in here that I was kind of concerned that, and if you look at, you got churches and show houses. If you notice that the problems of people going into churches and stuff now is because they know they're most of the people in the churches are carrying. And I'll give you an example. I don't know how many pastors we've helped get their CCWs to where they can carry concealed inside the churches. And people that go to the show houses now feel more comfortable if they do have a CCW. This law will prohibit that. And I'm hoping that we can make some amendments to some of these issues. And I've got another example I'm hoping somebody can answer. We go to Las Vegas and we go to the outlet malls, and we love to do that. My wife spends a lot of money, and there's one store in that outlet mall that has posted no guns allowed. So we don't go in that store at all. But under this bill, would that mean the whole plaza would shut down because one person posted? And then the other thing is these big malls, if you come in different areas, they'll have to post every door. Does that mean every store is going to be liable because they took my constitutional rights away for protection for myself and my family? So I'm hoping somebody can answer this, and I think that's important. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman Ellison. We're going to register you as in opposition. We typically don't take questions from those speaking in opposition. The good news, of course, is that you are here in the building, and I invite you to connect with Assemblywoman Howdigy on some of those questions when you're able to, but appreciate you providing testimony on the Zoom this morning, Assemblyman Ellison.
Yes, sir, and I did go to Ms. Heidi last night, and she was pretty busy, and I was. So I did try to make up a meeting, and I'd like to see if we can get some of these questions answered if we could, and I appreciate you allowing me to speak. Thank you.
You are most welcome. I think that is it for opposition on the Zoom. I'm just going to do a quick scroll through. If there's somebody else in opposition on the Zoom, if you would turn your camera on and let me know. I don't see anybody. So BPS, it is time to go to the phone lines in opposition, and we'll remind our callers that you'll have 2 minutes to provide opposition testimony. Please don't feel compelled to use the entire 2 minutes so we can get through as many callers as possible. BPS, let's take the first caller in opposition, please.
Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 286, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. We will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 390. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, Chairman Yeager and Assemblymen and Assemblywomen of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Adam McGuire, A-D-A-M, McGuire, M-C-G-U-I-R-E. I've been a Nevada resident for half my life now. I was originally a resident of California, and then also during my time as a resident of Nevada, served the country in the Navy, and I have examples where, and since the age of 21, I have been a CCW holder. While I was stationed in New Hampshire did not recognize my CCW permit in Nevada. One night, while walking my dog, I was approached by an individual brandishing a knife. Did not speak to me and kept approaching me until I bluffed that I had my firearm on me. However, I was lucky. There are other individuals in the state of Nevada who have had situations where they had to leave their firearm off their person because of where they were attending. This is, I'm speaking of the story of Amanda Collins. Amanda Collins was attending the University of Nevada, Reno, and had to leave her CCW off her person while she was attending a late night course. On her way back to her vehicle, she was stopped by a man who proceeded to rape her. She was unable to defend herself. Later on, there was another woman who went missing. She, unfortunately, was found dead. It was later connected that both individuals were attacked by the same man. Those two were extremely unlucky situations, especially with Amanda Collins. She had the right to carry her firearm, but was unable to exercise it because of the restrictions on the location where she was attending. Just food for thought. And I do thank the Assemblywoman, I cannot pronounce your name, I apologize, I've had bad reception this whole time, the sponsor of the bill. I do thank you for clarifying NRS 2023673 and the definition of a public building. And I would suggest that instead of an immediate, either separate out open carry versus concealed carry, or in some way have it where after an individual is approached, that then it becomes criminal trespass and potentially has that first misdemeanor. Thank you all for your time, and that's it.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. McGuire, and thank you for your service as well. BPS, let's take the next caller in opposition.
Thank you. Next caller with the last three digits of 105. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, committee chairman and committee. My name is Lynn Chapman, LYNNCHAPMAN. I'm the state vice president of Nevada Families for Freedom. I just wanted to make a few comments. I noticed that most of the people calling in support were from Las Vegas, and I understand why. There was a terrible incident that happened in Las Vegas, but the rest of the state really doesn't like this bill. It's not really a very good bill for everyone. I also wanted to talk about the woman in the store. My heart goes out to her because I understand the terrifying incident that happened, and that she still is suffering from the residue from that terrible incident. But maybe if she can look at it at a different perspective, the woman in the store with the gun on her hip, she was there doing her business. She wasn't waving the gun around, and she was just doing her business. And if a man came in wielding a machete, at least this woman would be able to protect herself, her family, and this other woman. So maybe if she looks at it a little bit differently, it might help her in the future to understand why people want to carry. Also, I noticed that we're not talking about the borders being wide open. We're having a lot of people come over our borders every day, hundreds, thousands in a week. The problem with that is the other day it was on the news that 4 known terrorists were apprehended. 4. Now, how many other terrorists have gotten over our borders? What kind of weapons are they bringing in? What other things are they bringing in? What about the cartels that are now operating on our side of the border? They're bringing in all sorts of weapons and terrible things. So maybe we should start looking more at that instead of going after the law-abiding citizens. And I think that's where the problem lies. You're going after law-abiding citizens to jump through more hoops, and we really don't need them to do that. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony in opposition, Ms. Chapman. BPS, let's take the next caller in opposition, please.
Next caller with the last three digits of 859. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. This is Janine Hansen, Janinehansen. I'm the state chairman of the Independent American Party. I've had a concealed carry permit for over 25 years. We oppose AB 286, which is a violation of our rights and nullifies our God-given inalienable rights. When you cannot exercise a right anywhere except in your own home, when the right to keep and bear arms is so infringed that you cannot exercise it, there is no right. In the Nevada Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, it states, all men by nature are free and equal and have inalienable rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness. AB 286 takes away our inalienable right to defend life and liberty and to obtain safety and happiness by severely restricting the right to carry a firearm almost everywhere we go. That right, which according to the Second Amendment in the U.S. Constitution shall not be infringed, just disappears because of AB 286. When you, in Article 1, Section 11 of the Nevada Constitution, it states, every citizen has the right to keep and bear arms for security and defense. AB 286 violates that provision of the Nevada Constitution when you cannot exercise the right to keep and bear arms at a golf course, theater, church, hotel, shopping mall, stadium, arena, concert, showroom, anywhere there is live entertainment, a sporting event, rodeo, ball game, fireworks event, state or county fair, horse or car racing, all those places become gun-free zones, which makes all about law-abiding citizens targets of criminals. AB 286 denies us safety and the right of self-defense. The criminals will know that there is no one there who can stop them from killing law-abiding citizens. AB 286 will not make us safer, but more vulnerable to those who unlawfully will continue to use guns. We all know that criminals prefer unarmed victims. Defeat this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Hansen. BPS, let's go to the next caller in opposition, please.
Next caller with the last three digits of 340. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
My name is Maury Rezai, M-O-R-Y, last name R-E-Z-A-I, a citizen of Las Vegas, Nevada. For the last 5 years, I moved here from Chicago. Chicago law doesn't allow anybody to carry any guns. And that wasn't the reason I came here. It was for other reasons. However, I've had many problems having go to certain neighborhoods knowing that the criminals carry guns and they know I don't have one. And the other question that the other reason is right now this bill, I am opposed to it because I'm also an insurance agent. And looking at it, the liability that is covered, anybody at 7-Eleven is not able to cover me for me and my children. If I die, the coverage they have maybe is $1 million coverage, and that's not enough for my family and all those that they come after my disabled child to be supported. This bill is not sufficient, even though it has some good reasons. I appreciate Chairman and the committee and those that are for this, that they have these comments about this plan. However, there's a lot of deficiencies in such a bill. Therefore, I am opposed to it. If a company is willing to put a sign up there, they should also put a sign next to it saying, yeah, if you come in here, you turn in your guns, we will cover you for $10 million in case somebody shoots you, or some large liability clarified for the person that's willing to walk into that neighborhood, are capable of showing that there's enough coverage, so they are willing with their own willingness to go inside. So that bill has a lot of deficiencies. You have to specify the insurance information clearly and largely mentioned, if you come in here and you die, we give you a $10 million or some large amount. It has to be figured out by the legislation to how much it's going to be. That is going to cover everyone that's getting killed in that, in case of something happens or some kind of injury. So I oppose to this until all of these questions are properly answered. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for everybody for this.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Rizai. VPS, let's take the next caller in opposition, please.
On to the next caller with the last three digits of 903. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
This is Josh.
Go ahead, caller.
Yes, this is Josh Rosenthal. I'm owner of firearmsdiscounts.com, and I also own a staffing company in town. And I'm opposed to this bill. For one, this is another avenue to freeze or hold or set back righteous gun owners. Had this bill be more along the lines of people carrying concealed firearms and are not allowed to, I'd be more for it. But according to CDC, there's 500,000 to 3 million lives that are saved each year by guns used in defensive manners. And one of the ways that it wouldn't be helpful, nor would the law, would be for October 1 or any other mass shooting. My opinion is criminals are going to get guns and they're going to do what they want to do. They're not going to be worried about signs on doors or misdemeanors or even felonies at that matter. I mean, somebody committing multiple murders is not worried about a felony for carrying a firearm. It was also brought up recently on this call about, bordering states and laws. And I think they were just referring to California. Because Arizona and Utah, which are neighboring states, are constitutional carry states. They support our Second Amendment rights and our rights to bear arms. And I feel that this bill is championing the beliefs of false hopes and is against our Second Amendment right. And for the business owners who believe that they could protect themselves by putting signs up that we're not allowed to bear arms or licensed carriers are not allowed to bear arms in their facilities, I think, and I'm not a lawyer, but would open up to liability and lawsuits if something should happen. So, I feel that Nevada has become too far left to focus on what's right and what is best for our community and the rightful gun owners and the right to bear arms and our Second Amendment, and focusing more on political and special interest groups' beliefs. And I'm against this.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Rosenthal. VPS, let's go to the next caller in opposition, please.
Thank you. Next caller with the last three digits of 112. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Bruce Parks, BRUCEPARKS, founder of Nevada Patriot and secretary for Battleborn Patriots. I would like to say that the play on emotions by equating this bill to safety is extremely disingenuous. I challenge anybody to show me one gun control law that affects crime rates by lowering them. You cannot, because none exist. I also find it disingenuous that you put two separate issues into one bill. These both should be treated as separate issues, not rolled into one. Untraceable is a misnomer, as is assault weapon. Every gun is a ghost gun because the serial numbers, unless there's a national registry, which would be unconstitutional, are meaningless. Police don't use the serial numbers of weapons to prosecute crimes. They use ballistics. I would also like to point out that you have the most voracious anti-gun groups giving testimony about this bill and were allowed to make presentations. This was not a fair and balanced meeting by any stretch of the imagination. You did not invite anybody from the Nevada Firearms Coalition, from the NRA, or from any other group that could give testimony and presentations that show that this bill is not going to do anything to make Nevadans more safe. In fact, it will have the exact opposite effect and make us all less safe. You do not make criminals harmless by making good citizens helpless. And I would also like to point out that there is a lot more to the state of Nevada than simply the Strip in Las Vegas. This would be a statewide law, not a Las Vegas law. I would also like to point out that on the Nellis site, the legislature's own website, there is a 9-to-1 ratio of people against this bill as those for this bill. I cannot, for the life of me, understand why we have to be so, well, disingenuous when it comes to firearm laws. I'm just curious, what part of shall not be infringed is not understandable to our elected representatives? There is a reason why the Second Amendment is written the way it is. I would encourage you all to reread that and maybe digest it. Come to an understanding that we have the unalienable right to protect ourselves, and that shall not be infringed. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Parks. I will note for the record, we did have a representative from the NRA on the Zoom in opposition, and the Nevada Firearms Coalition was likewise invited, and I believe they provided written testimony, and they may be on the phone. So I just wanted to make that clear for the record that we did have that representation. BPS, let's take the next caller in opposition, please.
Thank you. Next caller with the last 3 digits of 527. Caller,
Here I
please
go.
slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello. Good morning, committee. My name is Kim Fergus. I'm from Las Vegas. I'm calling in opposition of this bill. This bill was written by people who hate women. I am a domestic abuse survivor.
Ma'am, if you could, ma'am, 2 things. One, could you please spell your name for the record, and then could you please limit your comments to the bill itself? And we're not here to discuss motives of who might have introduced the bill, but could you please spell your name for the record so our committee secretary has it?
Okay. Let's start all over. I'll press the timer. Okay. Hello. Good morning, committee. My name is Kimberly Fergus. KIMBERLYFERGUS. I'm from Las Vegas. I'm calling in opposition of this bill. Okay, since I have to admit whoever wrote the bill must hate women, I'm a domestic abuse survivor. And the only thing that makes me equal in a bad situation is owning and knowing how to use a firearm. Women are the vast majority of domestic violence crimes. Why do you want to take away our rights to defend ourselves? Why do you want to see women be victims? A legally armed woman is an empowered woman. I hope every person on the committee decides to stand with women and domestic abuse victims and say no on AB 286. Thank you. Have a blessed day.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Fergus. BPS, let's take the next caller in opposition, please.
Yes, next caller with the last 3 digits of 321. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 321. Please press *6 to begin your testimony.
Good morning, committee members. My name is Spencer Chu. I'm a student at UNLV and a resident of Assembly District 9. I wanted to call in and state my opposition to this bill. I'm particularly
Sir, could you just spell your last name for us, please?
Yes, of course. I'm so sorry. My name again is Spencer, last name Achiu, and I'm a resident of Assembly District 9 and a student at UNLV. I'm calling today to express my opposition to this bill. I believe it's not only a waste of this committee's time, but also a waste of the taxpayers' dollars. I urge the committee instead to support things like campus carry as well as constitutional carry. And I also would like to echo many of the comments made by Assemblyman O'Neill and the important issues that he raised. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Ashu. BPS, let's take the next caller in opposition, please.
Yes, next caller with the last three digits of 962. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is Andrew Spinney, spelled A-N-D-R-E-W. Last name is Spinney, S-P-I-N-N-E-Y. I just want to start off by saying that I'm not a gun owner, but this definitely does infringe on your rights. I moved to Nevada to be able to have that right, and not being able to open carry in certain places, in my opinion, just isn't right. I also want to say that this is going to create division between police officers and the community, and when that division does happen, that's going to be on you guys who vote for it, and it's not going to be okay. If you vote on this division, you're creating it. And that's exactly what you're going to do. And that's what this bill is going to sponsor. Just a whole lot more division that we've seen throughout the 2020 year. And it's not okay. And, I suggest that you oppose it, everyone. So make sure you definitely oppose this bill, because we don't need more division in our state. And what happened to Officer Shea? That definitely wasn't okay. And I also want to just say that, this bill would not have stopped the Route 91 shooting. This bill would not have stopped it, because he bought all those guns legally. And he got into that hotel by sneaking them in there. So make sure you do your research. And I understand that's a narrative that you come with, that this is about safety, but this is far from about safety. This is about your narrative and your agenda. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Spinney. BPS, let's take the next caller in opposition, please.
Next caller with the last three digits of 050. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Sean Meehan, M-E-E-H-A-N. I am the founder of Guard the Constitution. I teach state legislators application of the Constitution across the country. I'm a retired Air Force veteran. I object to the short notice of the hearing, and although you said this is the start of the process, each step for legislation is a critical process, but I will give you a compliment, Mr. Chairman, that you are trying hard to give both sides equal time. I want to echo the comments of Ms. Hanson on the Nevada Constitution, on the right to keep and bear arms. Constitutions are not suggestions. They're superior to the whims of society and the will of the legislature. They are superior to laws. I also want to echo the excellent comments of Assemblyman O'Neill and the legitimate threat to he and his family, and how he desires to exercise his unalienable right to self-defense. I encourage all participants in this issue to Google the Luby's Massacre, October 16, 1991, in Killeen, Texas, where a crazy man drove a vehicle into a building with a firearm, went in. At that time, Texas law prohibited a woman inside from keeping her firearm under threat of losing her professional license. She had been trained. After analysis said she would have been able to stop the shooter and defend herself. He came right up in front of her, put her family, her parents on their knees and executed them right in front of her. One of the earlier professional testifiers from one of the casinos said, quote, "This bill is designed for people that are not law-abiding." Quote, "You are fixing to pass a law that some characterize as for people that are not law-abiding." I'll let you all figure out what that means. Currently, federal law prohibits much of the manufacture this is going to address. I will also say that Justice Scalia, who is a dog whistle for us conservatives, was said in the Heller ruling, which I believe the person quoting has not actually read. I would encourage them to do so. And I would also like to thank Mr. Reed from the NRA for his expert comments and some of the ones earlier. Law-abiding citizens obey the law. Criminals do not. Criminals that kill people mostly illegally obtain weapons. And with all due respect, ladies and gentlemen of the Nevada Legislature, you will not take away my unalienable right under the Nevada and U.S. constitutions to defend myself. God bless, and everybody have a productive day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony in opposition, Mr. Meehan. BPS, we're going to take a couple more callers in opposition. Let's go to the next one, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. For caller with the last three digits of 333, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Deshaw, D-A-R-Y-L, last name Deshaw, D-E-S-H-A-W. I'm a 26-year resident of Las Vegas. I'm 60 years old. I've handled firearms since I was 6 years old. I grew up in a different society from what Las Vegas is today, but very much like most of the rest of the state is. I understand the people who fear firearms, that they don't see that they're not as dangerous as they think they are. The problems actually come from the criminal element. A lot of the problems are societal problems that this bill will not solve. Most of the things I had on my list to mention have already been brought up. I'll hit on them again, but the important one I wanted to throw out here, and I haven't heard anybody else say anything about it, this bill creates a taking of property. If people cannot possess a gun that they have built themselves legally, it is a constitutional taking of property, and it provides no compensation for that. That's federally unconstitutional. So my question is, how do you intend to pay these people for their firearms? Where's this millions of dollars going to come from? Because that's what it's going to take. Additionally, I might throw out there that your definition of a frame versus what I think you're implying what the federal law calls a receiver, and some issues with that, because with AR-15s, the receiver doesn't meet the federal definition, and pretty much the ATF has rolled over, played dead, and all the cases they had against those nationwide to try to regulate them, ghost guns and otherwise. But so if you choose to not buy these guns back and let people keep them, and they're not serial numbered in any manner. So how do you know if the gun was built 10 years ago or if the gun was built tomorrow? You don't. Now, California thought they were getting slick with this, and they turned around and they created a set of laws for it, and they didn't stop people from building the guns, have rule serial numbering the guns. That's not going so well for them right now. That's in the federal district court in San Diego. And California has a losing record on federal gun cases right now out of that court. I would recommend that you table that until you see the results of how that court's going to rule and what you can and can't do. Additionally, there are other bills in front of the U.S. Congress right now that are attempting to regulate these so-called ghost guns. I would maybe take a lead and wait to see what happens there. You know, we don't need 10 sets of regulations all over this country for the same thing. We need one uniform set nationwide for whatever it's going to be, whether I agree with it or not.
And Mr. Deshaw, could you please wrap up your comments?
I'm going to wrap it up there. I will send all of you a lengthy written set of comments on the other items I didn't cover. But I just think this law is going in the wrong direction.
Thank you for your opposition testimony, Mr. DeShaw, and certainly welcome additional comments in writing to the committee. VPS, let's take one final caller, please, in opposition.
Yes, Chair. We will go with caller with the last three digits of 304. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 304, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. My name is Jim DeGraffenreid, J-I-M. Last is D-E-G-R-A-F-F-E-N-R-E-I-D. I am the Republican National Committeeman for the state of Nevada. I am calling in opposition to this multi-subject and omnibus gun control bill. I know, and because of the limited time, I will confine myself to the first part of the bill. Witnesses from prior testimony stated that although there is already law and policy that allows them to prevent carry on their properties, that these laws are actually ineffective and the guns are still on their premises. This law definitely infringes on our constitutional rights by preventing us from defending ourselves in these areas where guns are present. We've found that laws that infringe on our constitutional rights in this way do not prevent gun violence, as has been said, but actually make people less safe by creating gun-free zones. It was already mentioned earlier that the opinions on the legislative website are running 9-1 in opposition of this bill. When I checked it earlier, there were 1,089 opposed to 127 in favor. And so I think that we should take into account that this is typical with the gun control legislation that has been proposed both in this session and in past sessions, and that we should take into account the wishes of the people of the state of Nevada. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony in opposition, Mr. DeGraffenreid. I'm now going to close opposition testimony, and just so everyone knows, I've been taking a note of the time. We gave support 41 minutes, and I gave opposition about an hour in recognition that we had some questions for our opposers on Zoom. So that was the reason for giving a little bit of additional time to the opposition. That being said, I know there's still a lot of folks on the phone who wanted to testify in opposition, just like there were folks who wanted to testify in support. Unfortunately, our Constitution requires that we conduct our business in 120 consecutive calendar days, so we often don't have as much time as we would like to hear all the testimony, but I would encourage folks who were unable to speak in opposition to register your opinion at the legislature's website or contact committee members with your additional remarks. And again, I know that folks know how to do that because I've been getting those emails consistently throughout the last 36 to 48 hours, and I expect that would continue. At this time, I'm going to go to neutral testimony on the bill. I don't think we have anyone neutral on the Zoom with us this morning, but I am under the belief we have a couple of people who are neutral on the phone. And before we take those, I just want to remind everybody that neutral testimony is if you really have no position on the bill. You don't support it, you don't oppose it, you don't have concerns about it, you are simply giving insight to the committee about something that could be relevant in its decision-making process with respect to the bill. BPS, let's go to the phone line and start our neutral testimony, please.
Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in neutral of Assembly Bill 286, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. We will begin with caller with the last three digits of 504. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Brittany Sheehan, BRITTANY-SHEEHAN. I am calling in neutral position on this bill, and I'm going to make some legal considerations for all members of the legislature. All parts of this bill pick winners and losers and is inequitable under the 14th Amendment. We are allowing businesses to pick and choose who has the right to carry and protect themselves on their properties. But there's
Mrs.
nothing
Sheehan,
stopping property.
this is clear.
Yes.
This is clearly opposition testimony. This is not neutral testimony. So if you have something
Sir,
neutral that doesn't speak,
I would-
this is a time for neutral testimony. We have closed opposition testimony. So I'll give you one last chance to provide neutral testimony, which again takes no position on the bill, but would just provide something of note to the committee.
Sure, I am attempting to note parts of the bill for consideration. And one of the things that I found is that someone under the provisions of this bill could grant or deny firearm owners to carry on grounds of race or gender or their favorite football team or their political party, because there's no criteria for how this is adequately applied and not arbitrarily applied. And in that same sentiment, what I've seen in this hearing is that they are supporting state revenue vested in a private economic sector of tourism, and they are targeting another industry because of their legal products. Yet we permit brothels, which are illicit in all the other states, and service tourists who come here. And we permit marijuana, which is federally illegal. I also find that we are asserting ourselves to regulate federally because the company here in Nevada services their products to Americans outside of our state. There is also an issue with restricting people carrying on private property, and at the same time,
Ms. Sheehan, I'm going to stop you. This is opposition testimony. This is far from neutral testimony. If you have opposition testimony on the bill, please submit that to the committee in writing. BPS, let's take the next caller in neutral on Assembly Bill 286.
Thank you, Chair. Caller with the last three digits of 226. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Joya Rivas. It's Joerivas. I'm from Las Vegas. I would just like you to consider that if businesses have the choice whether or not to inform the authorities, they're most likely going to do it when it is a black or Latino person carrying a gun. I understand the need for safety and whatever, but the point of the matter is if there is a black person who goes in with a gun and a white person going with a gun, they're more likely to call the cops on the black person with a gun or a Latino with a gun. And I just want to ask, is this legislation going to hopefully be something new that really puts black, Mexican, Puerto Rican, etc. in jail? I mean, this sounds kind of Jim Crow. Otherwise, I have no further comment.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Rivas. I'm not sure that was neutral, but you didn't seem to take a position at all, so we'll characterize it as neutral. I want to remind callers on the phone that if you have a position on the bill, meaning you're in support or you're in opposition, you then are not in neutral, and you should provide your comments in writing. BPS, let's take the next caller in neutral.
We will take caller user 1. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yeah, my name is Greg Gar, Greggar. I'm a retired California police officer, retired in December after 29 years of honorable service. I'm also a veteran of the U.S. Navy, where I served for 14 years. The law as written doesn't recognize veterans or retired peace officers would want to continue to defend not only themselves but others. And I would just pose to the author of the bill to consider the veterans that are out there and the retired law enforcement officers that are out there that still have a desire to protect and defend not only themselves and their families, their fellow Nevada citizens. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Gar. Callers, I will remind you, if you are advocating for or against passage of the bill, you are not in neutral on the bill. So please, if you have zero position on this bill, you don't care one way or the other whether it passes, then now is the time for you to speak. BPS, let's go to the next caller in neutral.
Yes, Chair, next caller with the last three digits of 201. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 201, please press *6 and you may now begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Yeager. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Emily Prasad Zamora, EMILY PERSAUD-ZAMORE, and I'm the Executive Director of Silver State Voices. Just wanted to testify neutral today. One thing that we think the committee should think about and the sponsor of the bill should think about with this piece of legislation is voting locations, early vote and election day locations. And if this bill passes, we definitely think that it should have an amendment including these locations. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Prasad Zamora. BPS, let's take the next caller in neutral position, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 075, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yeah, hi, my name is Lauren Kelly, LORANKELLEY. I'm calling to be truly neutral. I don't care if this bill passes or not. I'm just informing you that we as Americans just won't comply with it no matter what you do. So I don't care if it passes. I'm neutral, but I won't comply. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. That was certainly a creative way to try to offer neutral testimony. I think it's probably opposition testimony, but we'll characterize it as neutral for the time being. BPS, let's take the next caller in neutral.
Next caller with the last three digits of 184, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 184, please press *6 to begin your testimony. Go ahead, caller.
1 second. I'm going to try to get the phone here. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. First name Justin, last name Ross. I'm going to come across as neutral today just to bring up the point of I feel the ghost gun part coming up was a way to get a lot of other things of topic colluded into one big bag. I think it's been obviously stated by several different people. The segregation of the two issues are definitely separated. I think you'd find a bipartisanship by doing so. The biggest thing that I'd like to state out is you find people carrying one side of the narrative and then flowing into an entire bag of tricks. I would just advocate for people of both sides, opposition and support of, to just critically and diligently think about the effect of the bill passing other than just the one perspective that they single-handedly aside with. Myself, avid gun collector, I can understand the pre-68 with the NRAs and the Nevada coalitions respectively so. I can also understand the perspective for those who are for it, for the ghost guns on the newer guns. That is definitely an issue in my opinion. So therefore, this is about as fair as I can give you a neutral perspective as everyone to take this into a critical perspective and really try to see what is being shoved into the cracks under that ghost gun. Because I do believe if you took the ghost gun part out, this wouldn't even be on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Again, neutral testimony is if you have no position on the bill, but you have something of importance to offer the committee in its decision-making. That would not be amendments to the bill. That would not be that you really support the bill but want to say you're neutral. That would not be you oppose the bill but want to say you're neutral. That would be you are truly neutral. So we're going to stay in neutral for just a little bit longer. And I'll note I only had 2 people sign up in neutral before the bill hearing. So if you intended to testify in some other way and you're now trying to testify in neutral, that is inappropriate and violates our committee rules. So we'll stay here for just a couple more in neutral. BPS, let's take the next one, please.
Thank you, Chair. Next caller with the last 3 digits of 891. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 891, please begin your testimony.
Can you hear me?
Yes, caller.
Yes, my name is David Gomez, David-Gomez. I am the president of Nevada Peace Alliance. I am also deputy director of LULAC on education reform here in Nevada, former president of West Side Action Alliance Corp with Marzette Lewis on the west side of Las Vegas, where some people have never visited. But nevertheless, I am not a gun owner, so I don't support it, neither do I oppose it. But the problem that I see is that the bill doesn't support nobody. Everybody's upset about the whole process. Everybody's besides themselves. I see too much division. And as assembly persons, your guys' responsibility is to help with the process and not to 24 hours, 48 hours, a half a day later present something and hope that it passes through or be denied. I don't know where and how.
Sir, this is not neutral testimony. This is not neutral testimony. This is opposition testimony. BPS, let's take the next caller.
I'm not in opposition.
We will go with caller user 2. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is Chuck Callaway, Callaway, representing the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I am one of the 2 people that signed in neutral prior to the hearing. I just wanted the committee to know that the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is neutral on the bill. I think that there's a lot of questions that have been raised that have merit that need to be delved further into. But we at Metro, we certainly support property owners' ability to prohibit firearms on their property. However, whether or not that's a criminal penalty, we believe is up to you, the legislature, to decide. We have seen an uptick in ghost guns, but we are in the process of trying to determine how that reflects with our overall impounding of illegal firearms, what percentage that might be, if it's significant or if it's not. And we are willing to assist or work with the proponents of the bill as needed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much for your neutral testimony, Mr. Callaway. Given that our 2 people who have signed in neutral have now testified in neutral, I'm going to close neutral testimony. At the beginning of this hearing, I indicated neutral would get 10 minutes, and we gave neutral 15 minutes. And again, that was based on the number of folks who signed in to provide neutral testimony. So with that testimony behind us, Assemblywoman Jauregui, I want to hand it back over to you to make any concluding remarks you might have on Assembly Bill 286.
Thank you, Chairman Yeager, and thank you, members of the committee. I've had various people throughout the bill hearing text me this morning and thank me for carrying this bill today. And it's my responsibility. I have to do this. I'm not a trained soldier. I'm not a trained law enforcement officer. I was never ready for the type of situation that I was put into on 1 October. And so I don't think I can ever adequately explain what it feels like to endure 10 minutes of gunfire over 1,000 rounds of bullets raining down on you, and you firmly believing that you're going to die, or even worse, that somebody you love is going to die. 10 minutes felt like an eternity. And I've made it my mission since that day to work so no one, whether you're a Nevadan or a visitor in our state, to ever have to experience that type of hell again. I do want to point out a couple of things. I know it was brought up about exemptions on background checks during the hearing and by Mr. Reed, and I wanted to remind the committee members that Section 5 and 6 of NRS 202-2548 expressly allow for that type of transfer that we were talking about. Also, during opposition, we heard Mr. Finley give numbers regarding the reduction of homicides and suicides, and Mr. Lindley has kindly sent to the committee members already information from the FBI and CDC showing that those numbers that Mr. Finley provided were incorrect. You have heard today, members, from people who say that AB 286 won't stop all gun violence or save every victim. No law we pass stops every bad thing from happening. The seatbelt requirement doesn't stop all people from dying in a car accident. No drunk driving law stops all incidences of drunk driving. No dropout prevention bill keeps every kid in school. A mask requirement doesn't stop every incidence of COVID-19. If the point was to stop all of this, then we should just go home. The point in all of these measures, including AB 286, is that we will stop some incidences. It will save some lives. It will help our law enforcement have the tools they need to keep guns out of the hands of those who would do harm. It will help the largest driver of our state's economic recovery be safe for the over 40 million visitors a year that came to Las Vegas prior to the pandemic. This bill might have saved 2 sheriff deputies' lives in Los Angeles who were shot with ghost guns built with parts from a Nevada company. And it might have saved us from 1 October 2017, but more importantly, it might save us from ever having that happen again. I want to thank everyone who has worked over the last few years to make this bill a reality. I believe it is a good piece of legislation that incorporates many compromises. I am happy to continue working with interested parties who are truly interested in seeing this bill pass. And if interested parties want to discuss further ideas and amendments, my virtual door remains open. But I will not sacrifice the safety of every visitor and every other convention for the convenience of one. Texas has passed these laws, which we modeled ours after, and their gun owners have managed to own guns under the same laws. To that end, I want to thank those who have worked on this bill. Particularly, I want to give special thanks to Metro Police Department, who under the leadership of Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo have done their best to keep the Las Vegas Strip safe during these tough times, including implementing crackdowns in the last months that resulted in 64 confiscated guns on the Strip. I want to thank Governor Sisolak and also Sheriff Lombardo in the wake of 1 October for making it clear that there was no tolerance for gun violence and for taking tremendous steps last session to champion and sign bills to curb gun violence. I also want to thank Everytown for gun safety, Brady United, Giffords Law Center, and MGM Resorts. And thank you, committee, for your time and for considering Assembly Bill 286. I strongly urge you to support this measure. Thank you, Chair Yeager.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Howdigi. Before I close the committee hearing, I just wanted to put on the record the way that we conducted this hearing time-wise. So the presentation of the bill was 31 minutes. We took 35 minutes of questions after the presentation. Following that, we took 41 minutes of supportive testimony, 1 hour of opposition testimony, 14 minutes of some neutral and some opposition testimony, and then we had 5 minutes here for the concluding remarks. Now, obviously, I know not everyone had a chance to participate who would have liked to, but again, ask you for your patience, and please encourage you to submit comments in writing on the legislature's website or to the committee members. Assemblywoman Howdiggy, thank you so much, and thank you to the presenters who joined us here this morning to spend a few hours of your St. Patrick's Day Wednesday morning with us. We truly appreciate it, and we hope you have a great rest of the day. I will now close the hearing on Assembly Bill 286. Committee, we have one other item on our agenda, which is, of course, public comment. By way of reminder, we reserve up to 30 minutes of public comment time at the end of each meeting. Commenters on the public comment line will have 2 minutes to provide public comment. Now, I will note that we still have a lot of people on the phone. Many of them were there to testify on the bill we just heard. Public comment is not a time to testify on the bill that we just closed. Public comment is a time to bring up matters of a general nature within the jurisdiction of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. So if you were thinking about using public comment to try to express your opinion on the bill we just heard, that would be inappropriate, and you will forfeit your right to give public comment if you try to do that. With that being said, BPS, let's go to the public comment line and take our first caller in public comment this morning.
Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. We will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 556. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Anne Marie Grant, ANNEMARIE GRANT. My brother Thomas Purdy, as you know, was hogtied by Reno police and then asphyxiated to death while still hogtied and prone by Washoe County Sheriff's Office. It's the little things that I miss the most from my brother: a hug, a phone call, the way he was so protective of my son and would always ask and make sure that nobody was bothering him. I miss hearing him say, "Love you, Ann," at the end of our conversations. My brother was a father of 2 children who were 10, Joshua, and 8, Juliana, when he was killed by police. I have to bear witness to the profound and detrimental effects it has had on their lives. Heck, I haven't even slept over 3 solid hours a night since 10/4/2015. Can you try to imagine being a child having to process your parent being asphyxiated to death by those who you have been taught are there to protect us? Kenny Stafford was a father of 3 daughters when he was killed by Sparks police. Nico Smith was a father when he was asphyxiated by Washoe County Sheriff's Office. Johnny Bonto was a father when he was shot by Sparks police. Kyle Zimbelman was a father of 3 children when he was shot by multiple Nevada law enforcement agencies. Nick Farah was a father when he was asphyxiated to death at Clark County Detention Center. It was mentioned earlier today about trespassing and how it is such a minor offense in your state. My brother lost his life for it. And he was a guest at a hotel and just simply asked for help. There is not a single day, hour, or minute my brother and the torture and terror he experienced is on my mind. That is why I continue until my last breath to be his voice and advocate for change. I don't want your family to know this pain, and it's a real reality. I, too, once lived on an imaginary pedestal where my loved one wouldn't be murdered by police without consequence. Please support bills that promote transparency and accountability, such as AB 268, should it come before this committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, Ms. Grant. BPS, let's take the next caller for public comment, please.
Yes, Chair, we will go to caller with the last 3 digits of 803. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 803, please press *6 now to begin your testimony. Go ahead, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits of 803, you are now unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, caller. Again, caller with the last three digits of 803, you may begin. We will go on to the next caller. Caller with the last three digits of 900. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 900, you may begin.
My name is Maggie Mordaunt, and I'm calling to speak about this meeting that we just listened to. I feel that our world has actually been homebound due to the COVID. I feel that politicians really need to think about how we can get back to normal and get back out in the world, understanding that there are many criminals out in the world, and criminalizing law-abiding citizens. They really need to think about different laws that they put in place and how, or bills that they try to present, keeping their own personal feelings out of it and understanding that the good of the people and what our founding fathers wanted and put in place for us to protect ourselves against all foreign and domestic as well. And understanding that as a woman, I really feel that it is my God-given right to protect myself, my loved ones, any person in my presence or in my company. And as a firearms owner, I understand that there are criminals out there and really see that those criminals are looking at laws and how it will benefit them, as we as the law-abiding citizens are looking at how laws that are put into place and how bills are represented and how that can actually be something that is put against us, the law-abiding citizen. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, Ms. Mordaunt. BPS, let's take the next caller for public comment, please.
Next caller with the last three digits of 489. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 489, you may begin.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Stephen Crescenti, spelled Stephen. Last name is spelled Crescenti. This is just for public comment. Good morning, Chairman Yeager, members of the Judiciary Committee. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I would just like to remind everybody that today I would wish you everyone a happy anniversary this is the 1 year anniversary on 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And unfortunately, I would like to see our assembly members and elected politicians or elected officials to actually work toward getting Nevadans back to work and be able to provide for our families and helping us as Nevadans prosper. I've been a Nevada resident for 19 years. I'm not going to mention either pro or con toward this bill, but what I am asking for is that instead of trying to work toward partisan, whether it's pro or con toward this bill, that we actually put these types of conversations aside and work toward figuring how we get back to 100% in our state, not 25%, not 35%, not mask mandate or not mask mandate, is how we work towards spending our time, our valuable time as Nevadans, and helping each other and working toward making our state a great state once again. Thank you for your time, and you have a wonderful day. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you for your public comment, Mr. Crescenti. BPS, is there anybody else for public comment this morning?
Yes, Chair, we will go with caller with the last three digits of 170.
Good morning. My name is Gina St. Ord. You've heard PINAST space ORES. And I want to build on the last caller's comment with regards to the lockdown and the amount of people that have been out of work as a result, and it has caused a lot of hardship, homelessness. And I just want to share with you guys that over this past year, while all these mandates went into effect to protect my husband, with a cancer survivor, I did most of the shopping by myself. And this past year has been a real eye-opener over the amount of protection that I needed when I was realizing a lot of times I would go to the store and after I wouldn't want to go every week. I tried to go as little as possible so as to not be around other people, just to be safe. And I'd have to buy a lot of groceries. And when you're going to your car by yourself after a long day of shopping and loading everything, and someone sneaks up behind you to ask for money or other help, it's very disconcerting. And it was a big problem this past year, and it's just getting worse with all these shutdowns. I mean, I don't know why we haven't put a COVID cleaning commission and put these people to work cleaning and making areas and restaurants safe so other people can do business and open up. I just don't see what's going on, and I'm very concerned that my community is going downhill with the lack of safety. By the time I can even react, it could be too late. And I just don't, I would like to strongly emphasize that these laws aren't protecting us if things are getting out of control. And please put that into your perspective as someone who is trying to be both COVID safe and community safe. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for your public comment, Ms. St. Oris. BPS, let's take the next caller in public comment, please.
Yes, next caller with the last three digits of 272. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. Good morning. For the record, my name is Ethan Cullings, ETHANCULLINGS. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm calling this morning to ask the committee to hear Assembly Bill 161. By the end of the month, it is estimated that 500,000 Nevadans are going to be at risk of eviction when the CDC's moratorium expires. I understand this is beyond the control of this committee, but the least this committee can do is hear a bill that would give these folks due process. Ending summary evictions is not a bold concept. It is standard practice in 49 other states. Thank you for your time this morning. Please consider bringing Assembly Bill 161 to be heard.
Thank you for your public comment, Mr. Cullings. BPS, let's take the next caller for public comment, please.
Thank you. We'll try caller with the last three digits of 803. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, I'm Deborah Songer, DebraSonger. Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
I condone all this. I mean, I don't condone, and I am sorry for these people that have seen a barrel of a shotgun or a gun being shot at. I have. I have been a victim twice. I was raped, kidnapped, and raped. If I had had a firearm, I didn't, I would be fine. But nowadays, we're having everybody. And, I mean, I was a victim. I had a sawed-off shotgun to my head. I told him to shoot me, okay? I was done. I had 2 babies. But I want you guys to, I would like you to just clean up. We have bills against firearms and all this. Do with the law. You're not getting the criminal. This bill isn't getting the criminal off the street. Yeah, I'm very emotional about it. But it's not going to keep the hands of the criminals. The law-abiding citizens do abide by the law. It's the criminals. And we're going to get more and more coming from California, Arizona. I mean, they've already caught people coming in with guns. And I'm not automatic guns, not semi-automatic, automatic. We have the White House and everything fenced off. How many guns do they have surrounding? And then how many guns do we have surrounding our city? None. We have nothing to protect ourselves but our guns. And I don't even own a gun. but for our gun people. So please think about this. I am sorry. I understand about a gun shooting. Trust me. Like I said, I've had a sawed-off shotgun to my head. You don't know how that feels. That is worse than hearing a gunshot. I'm sorry. All he had to do was click that, and I heard it set for him to click one more click. So please, we need the gun-abiding citizens to be able to have that, because we do depend on them when we need them. And maybe if somebody had known about this guy that went in there with nobody knowing that they had guns, because he didn't let anybody know, that's not going to stop him, because his mind was set. He was going to hurt. He was going to condemn, kill some people for some reason. But that's not your average abiding gun person. And please,
Ma'am, could you please wrap up your comments?
Yes. I'm sorry I took too much time, but please think about it, because you wouldn't like a gun against your head or anywhere else. So please, I'm totally against this. Bye. I'm sorry.
Thank you for your public comment, Ms. Songer. BPS, is there anybody else in the public comment line?
Yes, Chair. We will try caller user 1. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Greg Gar, G-R-E-G-G-A-R. Again, I'm the retired California peace officer with 29 and a half years of honorable service, 14 years of service to U.S. Navy. I just want to share a quick story. I was on the job in the Los Angeles area. I'd been on the job for about a year, and I got a call of a vehicle accident. When we got there, it became obvious it was no accident. Seated in the right front seat was a deceased Asian male, and seated in the right front seat was a deceased Asian female. The Asian male had a golf ball sized hole in the back of his head, and the whole front part of his face was completely blown off. The Asian female had a golf ball sized hole in the front of her face, and the whole back side of her head was completely blown off. They owned a Winchell's donut store, and they were held up at gunpoint and told to drive to a remote location. This is the location where we found them. And the person in the back seat had a sawed-off shotgun, which was illegal at the time. Pointed it at the Asian male's head, blew it off, and while the wife was, I would imagine, screaming and looking over the back seat, shot her in the face. The smell from their bodies in that vehicle stayed in my nostrils for several hours, and the memory of that smell for several days. We all would like to have laws that protect people, myself included. I enforced laws for 29 and a half years. The Assemblywoman says that if the law doesn't prevent all deaths, if it prevents one, then it's a good law.
Sir, we're not hearing the bill, so if you could keep your comments to a general nature, we've closed the bill hearing.
You bet. I'm sorry about that. Accept my apologies to the committee. I guess that's all I have to say. We want laws that protect people, and on the same side, we want to make sure that these laws don't also put people's lives at risk. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, Mr. Gar. BPS, is there anybody else for public comment?
For callers that recently joined and are wishing to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And we ask caller with the last 3 digits of 285. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Amber Carrillo. That is AMBERCARRILLO. And I strongly oppose this bill 286. I own Integritas,
Ma'am,
the firearms
ma'am,
education company.
This is public comment, so we have closed the bill hearing. If you have public comment of a general nature, that would be appropriate. If your comments are on the bill, you'll have to submit them in writing.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. BPS, is there anybody else for public comment?
Yes, Chair. Caller with the last three digits of 008. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 008. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and begin your public comment.
Do you hear me now?
Yes,
Can you
go
hear me
ahead,
now?
caller.
Thank you very much. Name, Jesse, Jesse, Mosley, Mosley. My understanding is the bill comments are now closed. If I want to submit something, I have to do so in writing. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir. We're in public comment, so this would be time for matters of a general nature not relating to the bill we heard.
Okay. I appreciate your time. I will submit something in writing to your offices. Thank you.
Thank you so much. BPS, is there anybody else who'd like to give public comment?
Yes, Chair. Caller with the last three digits of 891. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is David Gomez, Nevada Peace Alliance, DAVIDGOMEZ. I don't appreciate getting hung up on. I don't like that. And I don't appreciate it just blatantly taking consideration of other people. So being Blaxican or whatever I am, you can consider another person and say, sir, this is not part of that. Sir, can you stick to this? Sir, but you won't do that for me. So what kind of bias issue is that? What does that say about you? What does that point out? You say we don't want to speak about the bill, then you gave me something to speak about. And this is what I want to speak about. As an assembly person, you're supposed to be unbiased. You're not supposed to pick one versus the other and be polite to one versus another. You're supposed to look at the whole situation and treat equally across the board. My inalienable right to be treated equal. Regardless of how you feel about me, regardless of what I did when I walked against people that ran for office and what was said, doesn't give you a right to treat me any different than anyone else. So when you speak to a woman or another man because of their etiquette or where they live, or they live in Summerlin or Henderson or way out there to the far west where you are, doesn't give you a right to do that. You have to treat me the exact same way. Want to talk about a bill? Hey, that's your guys' problem. But my problem is that you're going to respect me as a constituent, whether I live in District 41, 12, or wherever I live. And that's just the way it is. And if you don't like it, I can file ethics complaint against you and tell them to listen to it and tell them to listen how you treated me and how you treat others that don't fit the demographic criteria of what I am. And I don't appreciate it. And I'm telling you right now, because if you have to say something to me, you can address it in that mannerism and say, sir, Mr. Gomez, can you please...
Sir, Mr. Gomez, you are at your 2 minutes. Would you please wrap up your comments?
Yes, sir, I will, Mr. Yeager. And let me tell you, your wife is an excellent woman. She's an outstanding LDS woman. But I can't...
BPS, let's take the next caller, please.
For callers wishing to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no further callers at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. I will now close public comment. Committee members, before we talk about the rest of the week, I'm sure you're all exhausted from a long morning, but anything else that committee members have before we talk about next week? Vice Chair Wynn, please go ahead.
I know that this was a very contentious hearing, and I just wanted to thank you, Chair. I think you ran a very fair, open, transparent hearing, especially considering the, passionate nature of the testimony and opposition, support, and apparently neutral. So thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, this is Assemblyman Wheeler.
Go ahead.
I'd like to just say ditto to what the Vice Chair said. The hearing was fair. You did give more time to opposition actually than you did in favor, and I appreciated that. I realize we got a lot of work to do on this thing, and I don't appreciate people attacking you personally. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Wheeler. Anything else from the committee members? Look, I'll just say, this was a contentious hearing, and sometimes we have these hearings in the legislature, but I think we can be proud of the record that was made today. I think we all share the belief that we want to do what's best for the state of Nevada. We might disagree about what that is or how to get there, but the point of this process is so we get that input, and ultimately we all have a vote on legislation. So I want to thank committee members. I know these are long mornings and these are difficult hearings, but thank you for your question and for your attention this morning. And we have a floor session very soon, so I'm going to wrap up pretty quickly, but just wanted to let committee members know that we do have an agenda, a meeting agendized for tomorrow and Friday. Both will be at 8 o'clock. We have two bills on both of those days. Tomorrow, we're going to hear a bill from Vice Chair Wynn and also from our own Assemblyman Miller. So I look forward to that tomorrow morning. And with all of that behind us, I want to remind you that to head down to the floor as soon as you get a chance. And we'll see you all tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in this committee. This meeting is adjourned.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy St. Patty's Day.
Day.